Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic part 2. Which is what if Temari walks into Konoha with the fate of Suna on her shoulders part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. She hadn't slept. Definitely not the most glaring of her issues, but it was up there on her list. Naruto sneaking into her room in the middle of the night was just icing on the cake at this stage. At least it showed her that he was showing some form of interest in her. Creepy and uninvited interest, but interest nonetheless. It almost would have been comforting if he had simply come to try and kill her. Anything that was halfway normal would have been very much appreciated right about now. Of course, Temari wasn't stupid enough to expect anything normal. The only positive she had to count on was the weather, as she laid sprawled out on a random training field, her back to the GR, and the only thing between her and the warm sunlight was a gentle breeze. Such luxury didn't exist in Suna. She often found herself loathing the people of Konoha who took such things for granted. That being said, the longer she lingered, seemingly melting into the sun's embrace, the more she started to think that perhaps living here wouldn't be so bad after all. It wasn't much different to her life before anyways. Exchanging a murderous brother for a crazy husband and a sweltering desert for the shinobi equivalent of a holiday village was a good deal by most people's standards. When it became someone's bright idea to stand in the way of her son though, that was when her little daydream came crumbling down around her. What? She snapped, not bothering to open her eyes. Kaharu laughed. You seem to be enjoying yourself, she said cheerfully. Temari practically leapt into a kneeling bow. Lady Udatane, I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was you, she stammered out hastily. Oh, calm down, girl, the woman said. And get up. I'm not the Hokage. No need to show such formality. She stood up quickly and went to apologize again, a sharp look from the woman putting an abrupt stop to that. I'm not in the way, am I? She asked. Were you going to use this training ground? Do I look like someone who still trains? Kaharu asked, raising her hand to cut off Temari as she went to answer. It was rhetorical, dear. I was actually looking for you. You should have sent for me. I needed the walk. Besides, the both of us could use some fresh air, she said. Now, follow me. I have a surprise for you. Temari blinked owlishly at the woman as she walked away, taking only a short time before taking off after her. Kaharu, despite her age, was a rather brisk walker, something Temari found to be a pleasant change. The diplomats of Suna often set an infuriating snail's pace in their travels. Just one of the reasons that everyone despised protection missions. Where are we going? Temari asked. Wouldn't be much of a surprise if I just told you, Kaharu countered. We aren't far anyway. In the meantime, you might as well take the opportunity to pick my mind for any answers you're chasing. God only knows how many questions are whirling around in that head of yours. I don't think that would be appropriate. Appropriate went out the window when that stupid boy made a scene last night, she said. Temari couldn't help but smile. Kaharu's informality was a much-needed break from the political restraint she had been forced to conform to lately. She honestly couldn't wait for everything to be over and done with so she could get back to acting like a normal person for a change. I hear you gave Naruto quite the whack, Kaharu said in amusement. You heard about that? Temari asked sheepishly. Yes. But don't fret, it isn't public knowledge, she said. Although I'm sure there are many people who would appreciate the fact that someone tried to knock the boy down a peg or two. I don't think I managed anything like that, Temari said. Of course not. Naruto is far too headstrong to let something like that get to him. But it was a nice touch nonetheless. Temari chuckled nervously. I thought you would be mad at me for risking the peace. Kaharu scoffed. If one little hit was all it took then there wouldn't be much point in trying for peace to begin with, she said. No, we aren't quite that stupid. Relationships are difficult things under normal circumstances, God forbid we try to enforce the same standards onto those forced into it. Such squabbles and complications are easily overlooked, expected even. As long as neither of you kill each other then it will still hold strong as a symbol of union between our villages. In some ways that's all that truly matters, to those who made such decisions that is. Temari touched her neck, remembering the sensation of the kunai to her throat. She couldn't really tell how serious the threat to her life was at that moment, but it told her all she needed to know about where she stood in Naruto's mind. Has there been any development? She asked carefully. With Naruto, I mean. He has agreed to the marriage, if that is your question, the woman said. Not that he had much choice in the matter. He wasn't given a choice. Temari asked incredulously. But you are not of Konoha, Koharu said flatly. For the sake of formality, we offered you the choice to ensure that no ill will would be born from this union. The last thing we need is someone forced into our village against their will. A recipe for disaster, really. Naruto, I'm sure much to his annoyance, doesn't get as much lenience as he wishes as a serving shinobi of his village. For what it was worth, Temari suddenly became disturbingly understanding of Naruto's contemplation in killing her. While there was pressure on her to go along with the marriage, it was by no means a forced requirement. On top of already being a Jinchuriki, she couldn't even begin to comprehend the conflict the boy was going through. Here we are, Koharu announced, stopping randomly in front of a house. It's a house, Temari said questioningly. It wasn't anything special, but it was a nice enough place. Most noticeable was its lack of proximity to anything else, being in its own little secluded corner of the village, seemingly backing up onto its own mini training ground of sorts. This is your house now, the woman said with a smile. Well, yours and Naruto's, that is. Consider it an early wedding gift. Temari didn't know what to say as she looked at the house in awe. She knew that Konoha was going to arrange better residency, saving her from the confines of Naruto's cramped apartment, but she only expected a larger apartment at most. It wasn't very common for shinobi to have a whole house without belonging to a clan. Apartments were easier to manage with the minimalistic lifestyle they were often required to adopt, and it made cleaning out their stuff much simpler. Wow, for the first time since before the failed invasion, Temari found herself with a true smile. How can Konoha afford to give us this? I don't mean to be rude, but you are still recovering from the damage we caused, aren't you? Nothing we can't handle, dear, Koharu urged her. Besides, this is a gift from me personally. The village would have taken forever to sort you into a proper place. This was a much simpler solution. This is your house. Koharu nodded. It was, some time ago, she said. As the years snuck up on me, I found the seclusion to be more of an annoyance than a blessing. I've since found somewhere better suited and much closer to where I am needed these days. As soon as you agreed to the marriage, I arranged for this place to be tidied up. It should have everything you need. I can't accept this, Lady Udatane, Temari said. I've already had your things moved here from the hotel, she said sternly. I'm not in the business of making rash decisions, girl. It wouldn't be smart to try and argue with me on this. You're right. I'm sorry, my lady. I appreciate your generosity, and I am sure Naruto will too. Koharu gave an indifferent grunt. Don't take this the wrong way, Temari, but you are young and annoyingly naive, she said. Not that that is your fault. I was no better at your age. But, as long as we have this moment, allow me to offer some wisdom from an old woman. You are as expendable to everyone here as you were to your own village when they convinced you that being married off was the most noble thing you could do to serve them, perhaps even more so. The only real value you have is that which you make. Temari nodded slowly as she felt she was understanding what Koharu was saying. I don't intend on being any less useful to Konoha than I was for my home village. I will do whatever is needed to prove my worth to Konoha, she said sincerely. But you aren't to marry the village. Naruto? Temari asked. I don't understand. Koharu smiled at her and took her hold of her hand reassuringly. This village has made its fair share of mistakes, she said. Don't let it make one out of you. Before Temari could say anything, Koharu let go of her hand and began walking away quickly, offering a wave to the girl as she left her behind. Enjoy the hot spring, she called out, leaving Temari alone to dwell with her own thoughts. Temari, for her part, stood in place, a mix of confusion and unease cementing her feet to the spot for a while. In the span of a few minutes, she had been given a house, told she was worthless, warned against Konoha, and told to befriend Naruto. It was almost enough to make her quickly pulse her chakra to check for a genjutsu. With each day things were beginning to feel more and more surreal. So much was changing, Yet nothing seemed to be happening. It pained her to say, but there wasn't much she wouldn't give at this point to be back on some random mission with her brothers, tiptoeing around Gara while he murdered everyone he could. At least that type of chaos she was used to. She let out a defeated sigh as she made her way towards the house. While the idea of accepting it as a gift still didn't sit right with her, Temari wasn't going to deny that she was in dire need of a decent sleep. A quick dip in a private hot spring also sounded splendid. Naruto grit his teeth as the burning pain engulfed his hand. The red chakra bubbling out through his skin and forming a clawed shroud around his fingers. He grinned widely as the shroud began to stabilize, holding its form strong. The Kyuubi had already made it clear that his body couldn't handle much more than 3 taels worth of its chakra before it started breaking down beyond the rate of his regeneration. Attempting to train his full body chakra code was therefore meaningless until his body had developed some more, but localized chakra molding was still fair game. He flattened his hand out, the singular digits of the shroud melting into one and compressing into a flat blade-like structure. With a slight push he extended the chakra out past his fingertips, stretching the shroud as far as he could into a blade maybe half the length of his forearm. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Raising his arm above his head, he brought it crashing down on a large rock. His expectations of cutting the rock in two were met with sore disappointment as the chakra blade barely cut an inch deep before his hand hit stopped against it. With an annoyed groan he let the chakra slowly recede back into his body. What am I doing wrong? Everything, the Kyuubi muttered. You have neither the control nor nature for such a construct. Do not waste your time on small gimmicks when you have my power to call upon. It is beneath us. I cannot rely on you at all times. My body can't handle it. Then develop your own strength. You possess your own chakra, do you not? Naruto frowned. I wouldn't know where to start. The Kyuubi hummed, or rather growled, thoughtfully. Start where your chakra is most comfortable. The earth. I have an earth nature. Naruto asked in surprise. He had been curious as to his elemental affinity ever since he saw Sasuke use Kakashi's lightning jutsu. In part, yes, the fox answered in a grumble. Not that it means anything. With my power any element of nature will learn to bend to our will. In time what you humans call jutsu will mean nothing to us. For now, it would be wise to work to your current abilities. Naruto nodded in understanding as he slowly made his way through the forest of death. This training ground had become a personal favorite of his since the Chunin exams. While no one ever bothered him at any of the other grounds, this one was especially comforting in that no one came here to begin with, leaving him free to use the Kyuubi's chakra as much as he pleased. If it weren't for the weird snake woman showing up from time to time it would be perfect. When the chance arose, he figured it would be best to ask Kakashi. The man wasn't the most insightful teacher at the best of times, but his arsenal of jutsu was legendary for a reason. It wouldn't hurt to try and have more than just his Jinchuriki abilities up his sleeve. The shadow clone jutsu wasn't exactly the kind of technique he could rely on at all times despite its versatility. Much to his frustration, he also had to come to terms with the fact that his training would have to take a back seat for the time being. He had already caused enough issues when he tried to reject the marriage. The Hokage was rather clear about him not having a choice in the matter if he wanted to continue being a shinobi for the village. Naruto wasn't dense enough to think he would survive as a runaway in his current condition. Other villages would hunt him down for the Kyuubi, or worse, that Orochimaru freak would try and get to him. He shivered slightly at the thought. Thankfully the Sannin seemed rather focused on Sasuke. While being a shinobi wasn't necessarily vital, it was useful to him, so a marriage was easy enough to deal with he thought. Temari was where the real problem was for him. He didn't know her, didn't trust her, and certainly couldn't understand her. She openly claimed to want nothing to do with the marriage and him, yet she was willingly going along with it despite being given the choice. It didn't make sense to him and really put her sanity under speculation. How could anyone be that loyal to their village? Naruto shook his head. After all, he didn't expect her to be anything more than he could handle. There was, however, one very important question still lingering in his mind. What are we supposed to do with Temari? He asked. It was one thing to go along with the Hokage's little scheme and play things safe for a while, but it was still a complicated and unthought-out plan as far as Naruto was concerned. Whatever it is you insufferable creatures do in a marriage, the Kyuubi answered with a sickened tone. Naruto rolled his eyes. While the Kyuubi didn't show any direct hatred towards him, it didn't hold back on letting him know the depths of its disgust with the human race as a whole. In the fox's own words, humans were poorly put together sacks of flesh barely worth digesting. I mean, after that, make use of her, it said. She has been used by her village and has no allies among Konoha. It would not be difficult to sway her in whatever way suits us. It might even be of some benefit to have her on our side. Naruto stopped walking and scowled. I don't need anyone on my side, he growled at the fox. Needing something and having something are not the same, foolish child. The Kyuubi snapped back. If you will not use all that is available to you, then what use are you really? Do not let arrogance get in the way of your goal. With a huff, Naruto severed his mental connection to the Biju. He respected the beast, but that didn't mean he needed to have a voice in the back of his mind all the time. Sometimes it was easier to do things himself. He made it back to the village and began to contemplate how things would unfold in the coming days and weeks. No doubt Kakashi had already moved all his things to the new house. While he didn't like the idea of living with someone, the extra space and more private location would suit him nicely, he hoped. It was going to require quite the adjustment period for him, that was for sure. The Kyuubi had a point though. He didn't have a choice in the marriage, so he was stuck with Temari one way or another. Killing her was out of the question now, so it made sense to try and make the most of a bad situation. The girl had no one here to trust or rely on, especially after the invasion. She was alone in Konoha, just like him. But he could change that. He could be there for her, and in turn she could become useful to him. The only problem with his little plan was that he had more or less tried to kill her only hours ago. As such, the first step required of him was to apologize. He loathed the idea, but it was the easiest solution. It wasn't as if he had to be sincere anyway. As long as she bought it, that's all that mattered. The real question now was how on earth was he supposed to apologize for nearly killing her? It was of no surprise that apologies of any form were alien to him. Anyone who thought they deserved an apology from him either didn't live long enough to get it, or already knew better than to expect one. He didn't feel it was wise to try his usual tactics on Temari if he planned on getting her on his side. Naruto soon found himself feeling sick as he started to track down someone he sorely didn't wish to deal with. He had very little options in the way of people he could talk to or ask for advice on any subject, let alone the issue of a girl. As such, only one person came to mind. Someone who knew him well enough not to mess with him based on the subject. Someone who he figured would have at least half an idea of how to apologize to Temari. Someone who feared him enough to keep quiet but not enough to run on sight. Sakura Haruno. For the first time, his teammate's obsession with the Uchiha stood to prove useful. Surely, she would have some ideas on how he could best approach Temari. Even if she didn't, it wouldn't hurt to waste some time before he inevitably had to go to his new home and confront Temari herself. The task of finding her took an interesting turn when she failed to be at any usual spot that Naruto knew her to frequent. Once he tried tracking her by scent, he wound up heading towards a training ground not far from her house. Upon arriving, he was surprised to find a set of training dummies lined up, several shuriken and kunai embedded into the wooden targets with decent accuracy but clearly very little strength behind the projectiles. I know you're here, Sakura, Naruto said loudly to the open area. He figured she wouldn't be keen on dealing with him, but this was petty even for her. What do you want, Naruto? The pink-haired girl asked cautiously, slowly walking down the trunk of the tree she was hiding up. I don't know where Sasuke is if that's what you're here for. Naruto raised a brow at that statement. It wasn't very often that the girl wasn't somehow unnaturally always aware of the Uchiha's location in the village. I need to ask you something, he said, watching as the girl carefully made her way towards him. There was a noticeable sheen of sweat on her skin, and she was breathing harder than usual. You're training? He asked in disbelief. You came all the way here just to ask if I was training? Sakura retorted in annoyance. Naruto shook his head. No, it's just a pleasant surprise, he said offhandedly, ignoring her brief smile before she realized again who she was talking to. I need advice. Sakura crossed her arms and gave the boy a strange look. Since when do you want my advice? She asked. Last I checked, I was meant to shut up and stay back so as to not die. Obviously I am not here to ask advice on anything shinobi related, he said coldly. But if you are so against it, I may as well go and find Ino. Sakura's eyes widened. Wait, she said quickly, stopping Naruto in his tracks. What kind of advice do you need if you think me or Ino could help? She knew in her gut she was going to regret asking. If it involved Naruto, it was never going to be a good thing. But her curiosity right now was running marathons in her mind, practically bouncing off the walls of her consciousness. In all the time she had known Naruto, he had never, and she meant never ever sought out anyone his age for anything that wasn't in some way threatening or violent. This very moment she found herself in was as unheard of as it was terrifying. Naruto internally prepared himself for what was to come. He hated that he had to stoop to such lows as to ask Sakura for help, but she was the safest option. Besides, he had to be careful around Ino. He was sure her clan had warned her against using any of her techniques on him, but he wasn't prepared to risk anything like that unless he absolutely had to. I need help. With a girl, he said softly. Sakura's eyes widened further before her face quickly dropped into a scowl. Ha ha, very funny Ino, she said. This is the lamest trick yet. How stupid do you think I am? Naruto's eye twitched. What are talking about? You know, you almost had me, Sakura said, now confidently walking up to Naruto and poking him in the chest. Never thought someone would want to henge into Naruto of all people, but I'll give you credit for creativity. Almost bought the menacing stare too. Of course, this could just be a mind trick, she said, pulling out a kunai and attempting to swipe at the mirage, only for Naruto to grab her wrist and squeeze just hard enough for her to drop it. Sakura, he said in a low warning tone. Her eyes widened enough to threaten popping out of her skull as her voice died in her throat. Even as Naruto let go of her wrist, she couldn't do more than take a step back in shock. Naruto, she said in a haunting whisper, as if he was a ghost standing before her. I'm so sorry. I thought it was. Naruto put his hand up to stop her and took a deep breath. I don't care. This never happened, he said, receiving an enthusiastic nod from the girl. Good. Now, tell me what I need to know and I can leave. What do you need to know? She asked quickly, wanting this interaction to be over as fast as possible. I need to know how to apologize for trying to kill a girl, he said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. Sakura internally groaned. Nothing with Naruto was ever simple. This particular scenario was at least interesting to her. Since when do you apologize for anything? She asked, eyeing the boy scrutinizingly. I need her to, like me, he struggled to get the last words out. It just didn't feel right. He didn't need people to like him. No one did before and he had proved he was fine on his own. Who? At this point Sakura's mind had stopped running marathons and had begun screaming obscenities at her, demanding she find out what was going on and why Naruto was acting almost half normal for once. Even more important was the desire to find out just who it was that could make Naruto of all people want to apologize, let alone come to Sakura for help. In fact, just him talking to her like a normal person was such a rare occurrence that she could count the times on one hand. Temari, Naruto answered. The girl from Suna, Sakura asked. Why do you want to apologize to her? They attacked us first, she said, crossing her arms firmly. Just tell me how to fix it. Naruto said sharply. Sakura pursed her lips. You can't just fix it, Naruto, she said. People don't just forget when someone tries to kill them. Maybe you should just not try to kill people all the time. Why do you even care anyway? Naruto clenched his jaw hard enough to hurt and mumbled something through his teeth. What? I have to marry her, he muttered miserably. Sakura stared at him intensely. What? Konoha and Suna are negotiating peace again, he said. Me and Temari are getting married as part of that. Oh, Sakura stood there dumbfounded for a moment. Congratulations, I guess. Naruto was surprised. She was handling the news much better than he expected considering what he knew of her. He was sure marriage was a trigger word of some kind for the less than tolerable side of Sakura. We don't have a choice, Sakura. There's nothing to congratulate. Right. Sorry. This is just so weird, she said. Why would they choose you to marry her if you tried to kill her before? That was last night actually. Quote, comma, quote. Quote, comma, quote. Are you out of your mind? She shrieked. Naruto groaned loudly. This was a terrible idea. Hiruzen coughed heavily into his hand as he used his other hand to lean on his desk. He had been able to hold it off until after his nurse had left, thankfully. If she saw him coughing like this, he would end up stuck in the hospital. Not something he could afford right now. Pulling a small piece of cloth from his pocket, he wiped some blood from the corner of his mouth and took several deep breaths before trying to move again. There was no mistaking it. His days were numbered. Orochimaru may not have been able to actually kill him, but damn it if he didn't give it a good shot. It took everything Hiruzen had in him to take on his former student and the reanimated forms of the first two Hokage. Many were now looking at him as a pillar of strength for being able to overcome such impossible odds, but Hiruzen knew it was nothing but dumb luck. He could have died that day, he should have died. Some part of him knew there was no way he should have survived. Whether it was Orochimaru, too arrogant and confident in his success, making too many errors, or perhaps the technique used to bring the dead Hokage back wasn't as foolproof as first thought. All that mattered was he was alive, for now that was. His health was declining rapidly. Age was making things difficult for sure, but this wasn't age. His injuries weren't healing properly, his chakra wasn't recovering like it normally would. He was practically running on empty. The medical teams that had checked him from head to toe assured him it was all temporary and his body would catch up when it was ready, but they weren't fooling anyone, not even themselves. Is this a bad time? Danzo asked. The Hokage smiled as he turned to face him, doing his best to hide his surprise at the man's sudden appearance. He was so out of it he hadn't noticed him even enter his office. Of course not, he said, making his way to greet Danzo properly. What can I do for why? Ah. Hiruzen ched at his side in pain as he stumbled forward, only being saved from a hard landing as Danzo dropped his cane and caught him. Helping the Hokage back to his feet, Danzo carefully guided the old man to his chair and sat him down. Your condition is getting out of hand, Sarutobi, he said, going back to collect his cane. How long do you think you can keep up the facade? Hiruzen laughed bitterly. Not much of a facade, he said. I can barely walk anymore without feeling like I could keel over at any moment. He made a point to eye off the heavy bandages that covered much of Danzo's body. I see your health is still holding strong despite your injuries. I can have my medics look at you, Danzo offered, ignoring the Hokage's jab at him. The Hokage shook his head. There is little point in prolonging the inevitable much longer than I already have, he said. This was a reality we were going to have to deal with eventually. Perhaps it is best we don't waste time then, Danzo suggested. You need a successor. Indeed, Hiruzen agreed. Jiraiya has already declined. Danzo grunted. That man would turn this village into the largest brothel the elemental nations has ever seen. Hiruzen smiled. That could be an improvement, he said cheekily. This is no time for jokes. Always such a stick in the mud, Hiruzen chided. Fine, fine. By all means, make some recommendations. Unless you still want this hat all to yourself. Danzo frowned. No, he said. My time for such a thing is ped. I am of better service to Konoha right where I am. A better position in which to guide whoever I choose to succeed me. Hiruzen asked, giving the old hawk a knowing look. Someone has to guide the foolish. Hiruzen sighed deeply. Do you think you would do things differently? If you could go back, that is. He asked offhandedly. All of our mistakes. The things we had to do for the village and its people, the things we have to live with. Was it all really worth it? Dwelling on the past is pointless, Sarutobi, Danzo said coldly. All that matters is Konoha's future. Jiraiya has found Tsunade, he said, earning a look of interest from the bandaged man. She could prove to be the solution to several problems. Is she stable enough for such responsibility? Danzo asked with scrutiny. A drunken gambler who can barely live with the weight of what little guilt she bears. I don't know, Hiruzen said honestly. But she is strong-willed, and not above making the hard choices. I planned on sending Jiraiya out to try and bring her back. At the very least, she could be persuaded to come back temporarily for the sake of treating those who are still in need of more dire medical treatment. Jiraiya wants to take Naruto with him. Danzo narrowed his one good eye at the Hokage. The Jinchuriki. You've been making some curious decisions about the boy lately. Are you sure letting Jiraiya meddle in such affairs is wise? Naruto is already more than we could have hoped. He isn't loyal to Konoha, Hiruzen said. He isn't even loyal to anyone here. As soon as he is strong enough, and realizes we can't stop him, he will be a loose cannon. We need to nullify that possibility. And you think that the Suna girl can play a part in that? If we play things right, Hiruzen said. It will be slow, and must be done with care. I could use your expertise. The old war hawk almost smirked at his talents being recognized. Konoha needs a loyal Jinchuriki, he said firmly. Whatever you need of me, I will see it is done for the good of Konoha. I appreciate it, the Hokage said. How is the surveillance on the Uchiha going? Any notable changes? He has yet to try and access the curse seal, Danzo said. It is clearly affecting his temperament, but as of yet nothing to concern ourselves with. Hiruzen hummed in annoyance. Orochimaru sure left us with a headache there, he said. So long as Itachi keeps his word, our hands are tied. Only while he is loyal to Konoha, Hiruzen said. Make sure your Anbu know to keep their distance. We only need to keep an eye on him. There's no need to get in the way of anything we could use to our advantage. Danzo nodded. I will let them know, he said. Do keep me posted on Jiraiya's luck with Tsunade. Of course. With that said, Danzo got up, went to leave, but not before giving the Hokage one last cautious glance. Are you able from here? He asked. I can have my Anbu east you. No one will ever know. Hiruzen waved him off. I will be fine. I just need a moment to rest. The old Hokage watched the door close behind the old hawk before he slumped back into his chair. The pain coursing through his body was growing. If he had any hope of holding out the next few months, then he was going to need Tsunade's medical skills. He just really hoped Jiraiya had what it took to convince her to come back to the village. Of all his students, she was the only one who truly understood where to draw the line in this world. Jiraiya was too foolish and honorable, unwilling to do what really needed to be done when the time called for it. Orochimaru wouldn't be an option even if he weren't rogue. His complete lack of inhibitions would tear the village apart from within. Tsunade was his last real option. Even if she refused the mantle of Hokage, he needed her back in Konoha. Word had spread across the elemental nations. Whispers of that to come. The other villages had heard of the failed invasion. Preparations were being made, probes put out wherever possible, all in the hopes of finding a weakness, of catching Konoha off guard. He had no idea who would try first. Iwa was a likely candidate. But they had been open in their hostile actions in the past, bold and proud of all moves made against their enemies. No, it was Kumo that truly worried him. They had been far too quiet since the Hyuga incident. Something was brewing in the world, and Konoha was shamefully unprepared. Things were going about as bad as Naruto could have expected. Even now, as he trailed behind Jiraiya and Temari, all he could do was curse whatever entity of fate that deemed it entertaining to put him through a nightmare such as this. The Hokage hadn't even attempted to make it sound like there was any real reason for him to partake in this mission. It was barely a mission, maybe a goose chase at best, and not a very good one at that. Naruto had half a mind to tell Jiraiya and the Hokage they were going senile if they thought tracking down Tsunade of the Sannin was a good idea, but he had bit his tongue. It was surprising when he found out that Temari had opted to tag along willingly. She hadn't said so much as a word to him, offering Naruto only a handful of glancing looks for him to try and decipher what she was thinking. In retrospect, Naruto did find it amusing to be on the receiving end of such treatment for a change, finally understanding just how annoying it must have been for everyone to deal with him. That wasn't to say he planned on stopping anytime soon. He couldn't even blame her for it. He had been frustratingly silent towards her as well, the only difference being that he had kept his eyes on her almost the whole time since they had left Konoha. He hadn't apologized yet. There hadn't been a good time yet. That was the excuse he was using anyway. The truth was he just didn't know how, or more accurately how he was meant to do it. Talking with Sakura had done very little to help the situation save for making it clear that nothing special was going to work with Temari. That left him with no option but to approach things simply and straightforward. It should have been easy. He should have done it already and moved on with his life. But here he was, dawdling behind her like a lost puppy as the words formed an uncomfortable lump in his throat. It had been some time since Naruto had cut the mental connection with the Kyuubi. The fox refused to stop pestering him about how pathetic and infantile his behavior was. He was almost ashamed to admit that the fox might have been right. Even if he wasn't sincere, apologizing was something he hadn't exactly had a lot of practice at. It wasn't going to be pleasant, but he had to get over himself at some point and move forward. The longer he dragged this out, the less chances he had of making things halfway manageable with Temari, let alone using her to his advantage. As his attention came back to reality, he noticed that they were currently traveling through a less than ideal part of the town they were in. Gambling dens, bath houses, and pleasure houses, lining the streets. Jiraiya led them down, with the Sannin providing more than his fair share of leering stares to the women around them. To say Naruto was unsurprised would be a hilarious understatement. He knew the man's reputation. This was practically unavoidable considering Tsunade had a reputation for gambling. What was the Hokage thinking sending an unreliable pervert to the worst parts of nearby towns? Did the old man honestly expect any results from this venture with Jiraiya at the helm? He turned his attention to Temari, who had also caught on to the sad reality of their situation. She looked irritated at Jiraiya's behavior and antics, but was clearly restraining herself from saying anything. At this stage Naruto figured it was more out of necessity than any form of respect she had for the man, she had any left after today. Nevertheless, they continued to follow the fool for a while, watching on in shared emberment as he proceeded to ask what seemed to be completely random strangers various questions, none of which held any relation to his old teammate or her possible whereabouts. If Jiraiya truly did have some sort of spy network, then Naruto was sure it only existed out of pure dumb luck. Should we ditch him? Temari asked suddenly. Naruto's jumped ever so slightly before he caught himself, giving the girl a surprised look. He hadn't even noticed her drop back from Jiraiya's side to walk with him. What? Jiraiya? She said. Should we ditch him? Naruto didn't answer, instead stopping in the middle of the street, Temari mimicking him as they watched Jiraiya walk off by himself and disappear into the crowds. That was easy, Temari said with an unimpressed frown. She had clearly overestimated how great the Sannin was supposed to be based on reputation. Why did we do that? Naruto asked, doing his best to hold back his continued surprise that the girl was even talking to him right now. Temari shrugged. It was getting old, and we aren't getting anything done sticking together in a group like that, she said. We need to split up and cover more ground. Or better yet, search anywhere that isn't a brothel, or right next to one. She shuddered at the images now burnt into her mind for years to come. Naruto nodded. He made a quick hand seal, 3 shadow clones suddenly bursting into existence around him before all shooting off in different directions. They will search the town, he said. If Tsunade is here then we should find her soon enough. Temari crossed her arms. That doesn't exactly leave us with much to do, she said with a pout. I can dispel one and leave an area for you if you'd like, he offered. No, it's fine. No point wasting chakra, she said before looking around curiously. Do you think there's somewhere good to get food here? Naruto looked around and sniffed the air before gesturing for Temari to follow him. He wouldn't normally allow himself to use his heightened sense of smell for such a task if he were with his team or Jiraiya. Jokes aside, he didn't want anyone using him like a comp. Temari got a free pee this once, only because she had no idea he could sniff out the best food in any town or village like a nin dog. What kind of food are you looking for? He asked. Anything at this point, as long as it's filling, she said, watching Naruto curiously as he continued to sniff the air every so often and walking through the town as if he knew the streets as well as Konoha. Have you been here before? She asked. He shook his head. No, I just know better than to look lost in a new place, he said. Without a word Temari corrected her posture and stride until she was walking next to Naruto with the same amount of exuded confidence. She wasn't about to argue with sound reasoning. The unfortunate reality was that she no longer had her team at her side in these situations. She could afford to be relaxed and unobservant when Gaara was around. Anyone who tried anything would be dead before they succeeded. But now she had to be careful. Even with her village symbol still proudly strung around her neck, and the giant fan strapped to her back, it wasn't unlikely for someone to try something. Well trained or not, she was still a genin, and the last thing she needed was to look like an easy target. Don't worry, no one's been watching us, Naruto said, trying his best to be reassuring. If Temari's frown was anything to go by, he was doing a poor job. They walked silently for a minute until they reached a small food court. Naruto stopped in the middle of the road while Temari went to go and find her own food, only to be stopped as Naruto gently grabbed her arm. He ignored her questioning look as he inhaled deeply through his nose and locked eyes on a particular store nearby. Come on, he said, letting go of her arm as he went for the store. Temari gave him a perplexed look as she followed. It was an odd little place that he chose, significantly smaller than the other restaurants in the area, perhaps even a little cheap and rundown by comparison. As she entered the building, her opinion quickly changed as she caught a whiff of the smell of the food and she found herself wanting to drool a little. We'll take 2 curries, Naruto said to the waiter as he walked in and helped himself to an empty table for 2, gesturing for Temari to sit with him. Temari sat down across from the boy, leaning her fan against the wall beside her. It's rude to order for someone without asking them first, she said offhandedly. She didn't really mean it. Curry was always a welcome meal, but she had to say something. This whole scene was already too awkward for her liking. Trust me, if you don't want to eat the curry then I would stay hungry, he said, scrunching his nose up slightly. Nothing else around here smells like it would sit well. Okay. There was a good couple of minutes of silence as the two sat awkwardly, both doing their best to avoid eye contact while they waited for their food until Temari finally rolled her eyes and sighed deeply. Alright, this is getting ridiculous. She quipped sharply. What are you doing? Naruto blinked innocently. What do you mean? This. All of this. Acting like nothing is wrong, looking out for what I eat, talking to me in the first place, she said. None of this makes sense. So, what's your angle? I'm trying to be nice. Yeah, well, it's a little weird. You're telling me, he mumbled. Besides, you were ready to kill me just the other day. What's the go with that? Are we just going to act like it never happened? No, he answered through his teeth, quickly becoming nervous. You didn't even try to talk to me until today and I had to talk to you first. You didn't come to the house yesterday. Why avoid me this whole time and suddenly start acting like nothing has happened? He mumbled something under his breath, barely more than a whisper as he avoided the girl's piercing green eyes. What? I'm sorry, okay, Naruto said quickly, rapid-firing the words into one congealed mess of gibberish. Temari looked at him in surprise, eyes wide, and her next set of snarky words suddenly swallowed. You're sorry. Yes, Naruto said defeatedly. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have hurt you, okay. It was stupid, I was stupid. You didn't deserve that and I'm sorry. I didn't think you were the apologetic type, she said, still processing. I'm not. Temari couldn't help but smirk in response to the painful-looking scowl on Naruto's face. He wasn't even trying to hide his displeasure at having said what he had, but that only made it all the sweeter for her. A shinobi that could swallow their pride and admit to a wrong was a rarity indeed. Before she could say anything else, the two of them were presented with their meals. 2 simple servings of beef curry with a side of rice. Her stomach grumbled at an almost audible level, so she chose to waste no time in shoveling a couple mouthfuls in before she tried to continue. Eventually even Naruto dropped his sour expression and began eating, leaving him wide open. You've been mulling over how to say that this whole time, haven't you? She asked with an all-too-knowing look as Naruto quickly glared at his food and refused to meet her eye. Well, if it makes you feel any better, you don't have to be sorry, Temari said. My brother tried to kill you first, so we are even, I guess. Naruto's eyes lit up slightly at the mention of her brother. Is Gaara okay? He asked apprehensively. Temari narrowed her eyes. What do you care? He's a Jinchuriki, like me, he answered as if it was the most obvious thing. And, He's the only other one I've met. Oh. Naruto gave Temari an unsure look, something teetering between questioning and doubtful. Your village tried to make him into a weapon. His tone, much like his expression, was conflicting. It was as much a statement of fact as it was a request for an explanation. Temari looked down in shame. She would have never wanted Gaara to suffer the fate he had, but at the same time she had done nothing to really fight against it. It didn't matter if her opinion or actions could have done anything for her brother at the time, all that mattered was that she didn't try. Her village would never know the true level of shame they ought to, but she would, and it would continue to weigh on her shoulders for as long she lived. We did, she answered honestly. Not Suna's proudest moment, or mine. My father thought Suna could become more than it is, establish itself as more than the weakest of the Great Five. So much for that, and now you're stuck here, with me. No, Temari said quickly, trying to give him the most roaring look she could. I had a choice. I could have avoided all of this. Yet here you are. Why? Because if I didn't do it then they would have found some other idiot to fill the role, she said. At least I am a shinobi. I knew, no matter what, I could handle whatever mess I ended up in, with whoever I ended up with. Naruto tilted his head curiously. You still sure of that? Temari smirked. I already have you taking me to lunch, she said victoriously. I'd say I'm handling you fairly well. Naruto rolled his eyes. Come on. We better get back to the pervert before he gets into some real trouble, he said, pulling some money out of his pouch and leaving it on the table. My clones are nearly done searching this town. Doesn't look like Tsunade is here. Before he could walk off, Temari grabbed his arm. Look, I know you didn't have a choice in this, and I know you're just trying to keep your head down for whatever reason, she said, catching Naruto off guard a little. Neither of us have to like the position we are in, and I don't expect you to care about me, as I'm sure you don't expect me to care about you. That being said, at a bare minimum we should try and work together to make our lives tolerable. Finish your food, Naruto said, gently pulling himself away from her grip. I'll come find you once I've found Jiraiya. As he left Temari in the restaurant he began slowly sifting through the memories of the clones that had begun to dispel. It had taken him an embering amount of time to figure out how the memory transfer aspect of the shadow clones worked, and longer still to figure out how to manage it, but now he could use it to his advantage. Even now as he began his search for Jiraiya, he created several more clones to cover more area, making sure to leave one behind to keep an eye on Temari just in case. He hadn't forgotten the fact that it was likely there were those who would try to remove her from the equation to further the rift between Suna and Konoha. This is going well, the Kyuubi said. Something doesn't feel right, Naruto said. With the girl. No, with this town. Something just feels wrong. The Kyuubi took a moment to reach out through the seal into Naruto's senses, feeling what little of the outside world that it could before it grinned wide enough to near split its face in two. I can feel it too, it said almost excitedly. Someone wants to kill you. Naruto stopped walking immediately and blinked. What? My chakra is drawn to the negativity of all living things. Humans are by far the easiest to sense, so infantile in your ability to conceal your true intentions. Get to the point already. Someone nearby is doing a poor job of controlling their intentions to harm you, the fox clarified. I cannot sense where they are outside of this prison and you are not nearly competent enough to truly utilize my ability. It would be wise to find the toad and, the Kyuubi stopped mid-sentence as the world around him, the cage he had come to know so painfully well for the past 13 years, suddenly vanished. The color of Naruto's mindscape faded away to black and white as he found himself standing in an endless barren landscape beneath a red sky. Boy! The fox yelled in confusion. For a moment he dared not move. He had dealt with being trapped in seals before and knew firsthand how uncomfortable some of their inner working could be for him if activated. This was new to him. Had he been too hasty in his efforts? To just what lengths had that bastard fourth Hokage gone to with his imprisonment? When the sound of footsteps finally made themselves audible over his own internal frustrations, the Kyuubi found a rage burning inside him. A rage he had not felt since the night of the attack on Konoha. His eyes locked onto his target, teeth bared and the earth beneath him starting to crack under the pressure of his amming power. The intruder stared at him with an indifference he knew all too well. An arrogance born of generations of unchecked hubris and power that should have been torn from humanity centuries ago. Even in the presence of a Biju, those accursed red eyes didn't so much as blink in acknowledgement of what they perceived. The Kyuubi grinned maliciously at his guest and growled deeply. Uchiha. Temari knew what to expect at this point. Jiraiya had done nothing to hide his shameful proclivities. Not that it bothered her. He was a man of notoriety and renown. It was not for anyone else to judge what he did with his spare time or his body. That being said, she did believe that he could have chosen better times to partake in such vices. Coming up to the third establishment in her little quest to find the old fool, she sighed deeply before going in. The places were not disturbing as some of the more prudish would try to make her believe. The workers were surprisingly polite and helpful in guiding her in the right direction. She just couldn't understand how Jiraiya had the energy in him to power through so many places in one day. She knew she was going to find him pegged out somewhere along the line. Temari. She spun around quickly as the man in question came racing up to her, a rather attractive woman unconsciously slung over his shoulder. That fact was only second in importance to the expression on Jiraiya's face. Temari hadn't seen the Sannin look so serious before. "Where is Naruto?" he asked urgently. "He went looking for you," she said. "Where have you been?" Jiraiya looked around cautiously. "Where did you see him last? Take me there." Temari didn't waste any time as she took off in a sprint, Jiraiya following close behind. "What's going on? And why do you have some girl on your shoulder?" "It's complicated," he said. "Someone here is after Naruto." "Another village?" Temari asked. "Who?" "I'll explain everything later. Right now, we just have to find Naruto before." They both stopped dead in their tracks, a miv pressure of chakra suddenly blanketing the town's outskirts before rapidly disappearing. "Before that," he said grimly, ping the unconscious woman to Temari. "Find somewhere safe and stay there. If things go bad, get back to Konoha and tell the Hokage it was Akatsuki." Temari grabbed Jiraiya before he could take off. "Oh no. You are not just going to leave me here," she said. "If they are after Naruto, then I should help." Jiraiya groaned. "No. Keep your distance," he said. "I will handle whoever is after Naruto. You just do whatever you can to get the townspeople away safely." "Understood." Temari nodded, gently laying the woman on the ground. Jiraiya took off at a speed she couldn't hope to match and she followed his trail. The whole time her mind was racing at the implications of what was happening. There were people after Naruto. People strong enough to make Jiraiya of the Ing Sannin worried. What was she supposed to do with that information? Marrying Naruto was meant to be the most dangerous part of her life, not this. As she drew closer to the source of the immense chakra pressure, she felt it spike again, this time lasting a short while longer before once again simply vanishing. Temari knew the sensation that accompanied the pressure, the same dread-inducing power she had felt when Naruto and Gaara had fought. Back then it had filled the air for entire minutes, weighing down everything with its presence. She had no idea what could be causing it to spike and vanish as it was right now, but she knew it wasn't going to be good. The Kyuubi's grin held fast despite the disinterested gaze set upon him by the Uchiha. The man's Sharingan slowly scanning the Biju and the empty plains around them, no doubt searching for Naruto. "Do not waste your time, Uchiha," the fox chortled. "The boy will not succumb so easily to your eyes, not while I have anything to say about it." Itachi's eyes didn't so much as twitch before the Kyuubi suddenly found itself impaled to the ground by several large poles. Much to his curiosity, the beast continued to grin at him, a twistedly gleeful expression as if it was the only one in on an inside joke. It was unnerving. "Where is Naruto?" he asked calmly. "Beyond your reach," the Kyuubi said. "This is your doing." It laughed. "Foolish little Uchiha. To wander so arrogantly where he should not. Those precious eyes of yours have left you so blind. Remember whose mercy you are at," Itachi warned. "This world is mine to control. I know all too well whose mercy I reside under, and now, so do you," the Kyuubi said. "Ask yourself, what sort of prison doesn't have a warden?" it said, earning a sharp look from the Uchiha. The beast chuckled as an expression of concern spread over the man's face. What sort of father would leave his own son so defenseless? Itachi. No sooner had he heard the words had Itachi realized his mistake. He tried to react, his body refusing to budge, the world around him suddenly severed from his control, it had ever been his to manipulate from the start. He understood now the folly of his actions. To think the fourth sealing prowess was this extensive, to make a mockery of the Tsukuyomi so easily. His connection to Naruto's mind was severed as a blade sunk deep into his chest, and with his last moment of existence within that world Itachi knew he had not luckily escaped. No, he had been cast out. Permitted to leave. What have I done? Naruto stumbled as he chewed at his stomach. The seal burned and his head throbbed. What the hell? The Uchiha, the Kyuubi growled, pumping as much of its chakra through the seal as it could. Kill him, now, Sasuke, Naruto thought, regaining his bearings, and locking his sight on a man on his knees. A black cloak with red clouds, red eyes, and an eerily similar face. That's not Sasuke. Destroy him. Naruto grunted as he quickly drew upon the mountain of chakra that was being flooded into his body. The Kyuubi had a short temper at the best of times, but this episode was a new level altogether. Naruto had no intentions of playing it safe. His instincts were screaming at him and he knew that it was better to face whatever was happening with as much of an upper hand as possible. Overkill or not, he wasn't going to turn down this much of the fox's chakra when it was given so willingly. As his features twisted and the chakra began bubbling to the surface of his skin, Naruto started towards the man. He was kneeling, breathing hard as if already exhausted, a small pool of vomit in front of him and blood leaking from his eye. He knew who the man was before he reached him. The similarities to Sasuke were disturbing. If anything, he would enjoy what was likely to be the closest he would get to killing Sasuke himself. Lunging forward, he reared his fist back, the chakra cloak now almost already formed, and brought it crashing down on scales. His chakra cloak evaporated quicker than it had formed and he felt his own chakra start to pull away from him until he jumped away. His angry, albeit confused glare was met with a shark-toothed grin from a strangely large and fish-like man, wielding what looked like a giant club made of shark scales. What happened to your chakra? Naruto asked the fox, internally sighing in relief as he felt even more being pushed into his network. Do not worry about that. The Uchiha is right there. Kill him. What's wrong, Itachi? Kisame asked with a smirk. Don't tell me this little brat got the better of you. Itachi struggled back to his feet. It seemed a failed Tsukuyomi was more taxing than a successful one. We need to leave, he said, wiping the blood from his eye. Don't worry, this won't take long, Kisame said, holding his sword towards Naruto as it wriggled free of its bandages. Samahata likes the taste of the kid's chakra, and it looks like he has plenty to spare. We do not have time. Jiraiya will not be far. Kisame grinned. Then I guess I'll have to cut off his legs, that will make things much easier. You want me? Come and get me, Naruto yelled. His one-tailed chakra cloak already nearly reformed, he charged Kisame head-on. Narrowly ducking under a slash, Naruto was frustrated to find the Kyuubi's chakra once again being ripped away from him despite the sword never making contact. He rolled out of the way as the blade crashed into the ground. At least he was not being completely underestimated. There was no sign of holding back in any of his attacks as far as physical force went. Hold still, brat, Kisame said, swinging and slashing at the boy with reckless abandon. Naruto grit his teeth as he did his best to maintain his distance, a task much easier said than done. The man was fast for his size, even without his ridiculous overcompensation of a weapon, his reach made him challenging to hold at bay. Each attack was effortlessly followed up with another, every near miss costing Naruto more and more chakra, never giving him the chance to build up his cloak fully. The game of cat and mouse continued with Naruto trying and failing to backpedal fast enough to regain any standing. Kisame frowned as he stopped and looked disappointedly at Naruto. Guess the Nine Tails isn't what the stories made it out to be, he said. Too bad. I was looking forward to this. But playtime is over. He lunged at Naruto again, this time much faster and controlled than before. Dodging was out of the question. For all he was, Naruto was still only a genin, a child. Jinchuriki or otherwise, his limitations were glaringly obvious. The wind was knocked from his lungs as the tip of the blade crashed into his stomach, the force behind the blow lifting him from his feet and pinning him to a nearby wall. Time to come with us, Kisame said, twisting the blade into Naruto's stomach, its scales extending into his flesh and tearing deep into his stomach, stopping only as Naruto muttered something through a mouthful of blood. Huh, what was that? Naruto gripped the blade, managing to force it back just enough to take a shallow breath before glaring at the shark-like man, his eyes wavering between blue and red. I said, "You're Arg." He cried out in a mix of shock and pain as the tip of Samahata opened to reveal a large gaping mouth filled with rows of sharp teeth before biting down into his side. His struggles did nothing to the creature as its mouth greedily filled with blood, its delighted wriggling only furthering his pain and further adding to the pain. With each ping moment it continued to leech away at Naruto's chakra. A true shame. Samahata seems to be really enjoying your chakra. Maybe if you survive, I will keep you around as a snack, Kisame taunted, hoisting the boy's body away from the wall and slamming him to the ground, Samahata still hungrily feasting even as the boy's chakra presence became no more than a flicker. Bye. Hurry up and pee out already, Kisame said impatiently, twisting the blade again, this time receiving no response. His victorious smirk was dropped when he felt chakra erupt from the boy and Samahata began to flail about wildly. What the? He froze as chakra lunged out of the boy's body, wrapping tightly around his sword, and holding it in place. His chakra rapidly growing despite Samahata's efforts and showing no signs of stopping. Take over. There was a moment of pause, the calm before the storm so to speak. An instant of contemplation on the Biju's behalf. The Kyuubi could feel everything, right down to the now struggling heartbeat of its vessel. The benefits of being its prison did not guarantee survival sadly. The boy could still die. Such a death would admittedly be much harder to achieve than normal for a human, but still a boringly simple task. He sat there, looking curiously at the mental representation of Naruto, laying broken before him, his hand outstretched towards him pleadingly. It was pathetic, weak, disgusting. To have been put in such a state so quickly. But now he had an opportunity he had never considered available. The seal was still strong, but it wavered with the life force, desperately expanding its functions to draw more of the beast's chakra forth in a futile attempt to keep the boy alive. In its efforts to save Naruto, the seal's inner workings had opened a window. Such a flaw could not be ped up. With pleasure. Jiraiya's stomach turned itself inside out as he felt the chakra presence consume the very world around him. There was nothing else left but the rage and sickening bloodlust. He reached the scene all too late as he watched a large shark-like man get tossed through a building like a rag doll. Landing in what was left of the street, he stared down the one thing he wasn't prepared to fight. God help him once the Hokage found out about this mess. It was smaller than he expected, not much larger than Naruto's normal size. Whatever semblance of human appearance there had been was long gone. Its face distorted with an abhorrently large toothy grin, 2 large ears atop its head, and 4 long tails of chakra swaying behind it. Had this been any other situation he might have been excited to see the capabilities of such access to the 9 tails, but now was not the time or place. Biting his thumb he placed his hand on the ground. Summoning jutsu, he said, a large seal spanning out around him and followed quickly by several large puffs of smoke. When the air cleared, Jiraiya was glad to see 2 toads either side of him. The first was somewhat larger toad sporting samurai-like armor, the second an oddly shaped toad of a more cylindrical form levitating above the ground. Both seemed neither surprised nor afraid of what they were seeing before them. This is a right mess you've dragged us into, Jiraiya, Garotora said, his tone doing nothing to hide his displeasure. There will be plenty of time to tell me you told me so once we've saved Naruto, Jiraiya quipped. Gamma, you're on collateral. Try to limit what damage the Kyuubi can do and who it can hurt. Garotora, you're with me. As soon as I have him pinned, tighten the seal. He wasted no time after giving his orders, already blitzing through hand seals. He had to stop Naruto, the Kyuubi, whichever one was in control, it did not matter. Gamma was just as quick to launch into his role, heading off to ensure no civilians got caught up in what was to come. Thankfully, or unluckily, the Akatsuki had apparently ditched their plan to snatch Naruto, but now that left Jiraiya alone to deal with a loose Jinchuriki. He furrowed his brow as the beastly form before him focused its attention on him, 4 tails of red swaying arrogantly behind it with the cloak bulging ever so slightly as to threaten a fifth. This was not going to be good. Swamp of the underworld. Her fan snapped open with a flick of her wrist, feet digging hard into the ground as she swung with all her might, sending forth a tidal wave of wind imbued with as much chakra as she could muster hurtling down the street, or rather what was left of a street. As quickly as her jutsu had been unleashed was it stopped dead in its tracks, crashing violently into a gale of wind that dwarfed even her most powerful techniques. Everybody down, she yelled, grabbing a nearby child, and pulling them close as she put her fan up as a shield. The explosion that followed rocked the buildings around them. Wind tore through the streets and sliced at everything it touched, throwing debris around as effortlessly as kicking up dust. It whirled around them, nipping at her skin, tearing at her clothes, slicing its way through the fabric of her fan as she fought to hold it in place. And then it was gone. As the dust settled, Temari let the child run off to safety, letting out a deep sigh of relief as she looked around. Barely no one was hurt this time, save for a few cuts and bruises here or there and a bit of dirt in the eyes. She winced, holding her side gently as she remembered being thrown down an alleyway by the first explosive force of nature. A few cracked ribs was getting off easy. She folded her fan back up, ignoring the tattered remains of its insides, and snuck into a nearby building to catch her breath. These were the last of the civilians close enough to be in any real danger, and they would be out of harm's way soon enough. Thankfully, by whatever divine charity, Jiraiya was managing to keep Naruto contained. Temari had no idea how the Sannin could fight something like that, never mind be on the winning side, and yet he was doing it, if only barely. There was no questioning it now, the man certainly deserved his reputation. Temari was still reeling from the past hour. How long had it been? She could not remember. From the moment she had gotten close enough to see what Naruto had become, everything had become a blur. Her training had kicked her into autopilot the instant she realized her life and everyone around her was at risk. She knew trying to help Jiraiya was pointless, she would only get in the way and probably get killed in the process. She figured that her best use was sorting out the civilians. Working alongside a giant toad was an interesting development though, even if she thought she was imagining it at first. Temari, Gamma said, hurrying to her side. Are you well? Nope. Not a hallucination. I'll be fine, she said, waving off his worried gaze. What's going on? Gamma turned his attention to the direction of the battle. It seems to have come to a conclusion. He was right. Temari could feel it in the air. The wind had died down and the overpowering sensation of dread and despair had diluted. Never again would Temari take for granted the luxury of a clear mind in the absence of an iron weight in her stomach. What now? She asked. We should find Lord Jiraiya, Gamma said with certainty. I can carry you if you are injured. No, I can walk, she said, lightly holding her side as she made her way back towards the origin of the mess surrounding her. Humbling did not begin to capture the essence of what happened here. As she made her way through the empty streets and remains of what was admittedly a not-so-small part of the town, Temari realized just why Jinchuriki were held in such high regard. It had always perplexed her why Jinchuriki were so valuable. Why her father went to such lengths with Gaara when there were individuals capable of stomping down her little brother's rampages so easily. In a way, she understood that there were always going to be freaks of nature like many of the past and present Kage. It was not until now that she fully comprehended the value of a Jinchuriki, especially one containing one of the greater Biju. Sure, there were monsters that would come and go, but this was an act of nature. The Biju were natural parts of the world. Their power would never waver, they would never just cease to exist like a lone shinobi, never fade to old age or time. Jinchuriki were a constant power dynamic of the shinobi world now, and Naruto was potentially the most dangerous of them all. Temari, Jiraiya called out, wasting no time in reaching her. Are you alright? He asked, looking her over fretfully. Temari shrugged. A few bruises I think, but I'm okay, she said, doing her best to give him a roaring smile through the pain. Her smile was quick to fall as she saw the large patch of blood soaked into the side of Jiraiya's shirt. Are you okay? She asked. Jiraiya smiled sheepishly. No, he answered simply, ching his hand to his side. I'll live, but that little brat is much faster than I expected him to be. As much as it hurts my pride to admit, but if I had have underestimated him any more than I had, he might have had me. Temari tried to match the man's nonchalant attitude to his apparent near-death scenario as she looked around them curiously. Where's Naruto? He's safe, Jiraiya said worryingly. We might be banged up, but he is much worse for wear. Garotora took him back to Mount Myoboku. Ma and Pa should be able to start on his recovery until we can find Tsunade. We're going to keep looking for her. Temari asked incredulously. Shouldn't we stay here and help these people? Teams from Konoha will already be on their way here. The most useful thing you and I can do right now is finish our mission and get to Tsunade before anyone else does. How does Konoha know to send teams already? Who were those people after Naruto? Jiraiya sighed. Look, there's a lot going on that you don't know, and the less you know the better. If it has something to do with Naruto, then it involves me and I deserve to know, Temari said, crossing her arms in annoyance despite how much it hurt. A point had to be made after all. I will explain as much as I can once we get away from here. No. What do you mean no? I'm not helping you until I get a good explanation of what the hell is going on here and what kind of danger you and that senile Hokage have gotten me into, she said. Take me to where Naruto is. I will help look after him while you go play runabout for your old teammate. Feel free to pop by when you are ready to let me in on what mess I am caught up in. Jiraiya frowned. We don't have time for this. No, you don't have time for this, Temari said. I have all the time in the world. With a roll of his eyes, Jiraiya turned his attention to Gamma. Take her to Ma and Pa, he said, receiving a bow from the toad before he looked back at Temari. I'll be joining you soon enough. I will explain everything, I promise. Looking forward to it, she said as Gamma placed a hand on her back and the two disappeared. Jiraiya let out a deep breath as he knelt, still ching his bleeding side. This was way worse than just a little mishap. He knew it, and everyone else across the elemental nations would know it before too long. Akatsuki were becoming much more active earlier than he expected, and Naruto was in no condition to handle them. Temari was just icing on the cake. The Hokage's scheming might have some worth, but it would not do much good if the girl died along the way. He focused as best he could, his hand glowing a dim green against his side. He was no medic nin, but he had learnt just enough from his teammates to not let himself die so easily. As he regained his breath and composure, he began to feel frustrated at himself. This could have been all avoided. He was being too relaxed, too careless. Tsunade, please, for old time's sake, don't kill me as soon as you see me. As the sensation of consciousness slowly dripped back to him, Naruto became aware of two very prominent facts. Firstly, he was not dead. This was both a welcome surprise and a confusing ordeal, as the last thing he remembered was letting the Kyuubi take control in a desperate attempt to not die from the freaky shark guy. Secondly, and arguably most importantly, his entire body felt like he was lying in a pool of lava after being caught in a landslide. Pain was tolerable most of the time. Whatever this was, it was not pain. It was a cruel and prolonged death with a deceptively pleasant smell and... Wait. His internal screaming halted as he sniffed the air curiously and tried to feel where he was. His head hurt too much to try and open his eyes yet, but from what little he could gather while fighting the agony was interesting. He was laying on something soft, his head propped up comfortably, and there was an occasional cool sensation on his face that brought much needed relief. He sniffed again, ever so slightly turning his head towards the source, trying to remember the scent until he felt the softness under his head stiffen slightly. If you say I smell bad, I will end you, Temari warned. Naruto braved the light as he cracked an eye open and stared up at the blonde from her lap. Despite her warning tone, she had a soft look on her face as she soaked a towel in some cold water and put it back on his head. He opened his mouth and tried to speak but could not get more than a croak out. Here, Temari said softly, bringing a small dish to his mouth and helping him drink it. As the liquid hit his tongue, his face twisted at the flavor, but he drank it down greedily, coughing and spluttering as he finished. What the hell was that? He asked hoarsely. No idea, she admitted. The toads gave it to me and said it would help us heal. It is an acquired taste, but it does a good job. Where are we? Mount Myoboku. Jiraiya sent you here to recover after you lost control. Naruto ignored her jab at him. Where is he? Still looking for Tsunade, I think. We have only been here a couple days, so I imagine he has not made much progress. Why are you here? Naruto asked. Temari applied the wet towel to his forehead again. Someone had to come and look after you, she said dismissively. The toads wanted to put you in a mud pit. Naruto tried to sit up but was quickly pushed back down. Don't even think about it, Temari said sharply. You are not moving until Ma says it's safe. Until then you will just have to lay there and put up with me. Minutes went by in silence as Temari continued to tend to him. Naruto had never experienced this kind of treatment, this gentleness. It was a pleasant change, but nothing he would risk getting used to. As he slowly got used to the feeling of his own heartbeat pumping through every inch of his body, he began to try and reach inwards. Ever since he had discovered it, his mindscape, or rather the realm trapped within the seal, had been easy enough to get to. Too easy if you asked him. But for whatever reason he was having more difficulty with it this time. It couldn't have been the pain, that would normally make it much easier. Something was blocking him. Kyuubi, are you there? Quote. Fox. Nothing. Not a sound, not even the sensation of a disgusted side-eyed glare. He lifted his heavily bandaged hand and chid at the seal on his stomach, drawing a curious look from Temari. The medicine making you feel a bit sick? She asked. No, Naruto started. The fox, I can't. That blasted fox isn't going to be making any more trouble for quite some time. Ma announced, making her presence known as she hopped into the room. What did you do? Naruto asked through gritted teeth. Ma huffed. What we should have done years ago when that seal started leaking too much into you, she said. We warned Jiraiya boy that it needed mending, but would he listen to us? No. And now look at the mess. We were lucky to be able to tighten it back up at all. You should be grateful, boy. If Garotora had been any slower you'd be ripped apart from the inside. You can tighten his seal? Temari asked. Faye, it should never have been allowed to become so loose to begin with, Ma muttered. The seal key wasn't designed to remedy such things, so consider yourself lucky that it worked at all. Undo it. Naruto seethed. Ma ignored him and instead turned her attention to Temari, the poor girl lost in thought. Whatever questions you're brewing up about the seal and its key had best be left for Jiraiya boy, she said. We toads don't entertain the delusion of understanding whatever it is that the fourth Hokage did in sealing the Kyuubi. Nor would we try and help anyone foolish enough to try and replicate it. Temari's hopes fell as quickly as they risen. Has Jiraiya found Tsunade yet? She asked. At the very least she could grill the old pervert about the seal. We have yet to hear anything. None of our scouts have been summoned either. Can't you reverse summon him back here? Naruto asked. As entertaining as it would be to watch you attempt to lash out at him, no, Ma said amusedly. The summoning contract will warn us if he is in danger. Until then he is perfectly capable and likely has his reason for being so quiet. Which thankfully gives me all the time I need to make sure you don't go hurting yourself any more than you already have. Last thing me and Pa need is to be chewed out for being bad babysitters. She hopped over to Naruto's side and unwrapped the bandages covering his arm, frowning as she poked at the painfully raw skin beneath. Girlie, go find Pa, she instructed. He won't be far. Have him show you where to get some soothing mud and bring me back a pot of it. Me and young Naruto here need to have a little chat. Temari carefully got up, making sure to gently lower Naruto's head down onto a rolled-up blanket before leaving. What little time she had spent here was more than enough to know not to disobey the elder toads. She could only clean the slime out of her hair so many times after a tongue-powered slap up the side of the head. As soon as Temari was out of earshot, Naruto grumbled. Trying to move was pointless. His body still had a long way to go before he could run away from being chewed out. The only plus side is that there was no way Ma was any worse than the Hokage at this. So long as he was healed enough to run when it came time to confront the old man, he'd be okay. Let me guess, you're going to tell me how reckless and stupid I was. How I should be more careful with the power I contain? He asked. Maru wrapped the bandages on his arm. Sounds like you already know that lesson, she said. Hearing it again won't help you, and I've no interest in wasting my time. No, I have something much more important to pick your brain about. I'm not going to like this, am I? That depends on how honest you're feeling today, she said, hopping onto his chest and peering down at him. So, why don't you start by telling me exactly what it is that stupid old fox has been telling you? Sasuke stood amongst the wreckage of the town. His eyes scanned everything with his Sharingan, committing the scene to memory in a way only an Uchiha could. He had heard stories, read history, consulted numerous scrolls throughout his family's extensive library, and yet nothing could have truly prepared him for the sight he was now witnessing. A natural disaster. Destruction personified. He didn't need to get up close to understand what had happened here. Just being in the town when it went down was enough, watching the battle from the sidelines. And yet, despite seeing it, despite being able to piece together what was going on, he couldn't believe it. Naruto did all of this. He grit his teeth, clenching his hands so hard they hurt. How was the distance between them truly this extreme? It didn't seem real. It should have been impossible for someone like Naruto to be capable of this. But here was the evidence. Sasuke winced as the curse mark burned hotter and hotter, urging him to delve into its power, to give in. Kakashi's seal was helping a little. At least now he couldn't hear the spine-chilling whispers of Orochimaru himself lurking in his mind, but the sensations were still there. The clawing at his will, constantly bringing to surface the memory of when he had let it loose, the power he had felt, and then it would be gone. The slowest build up to the most sudden drop to nothing. It was maddening. Almost as maddening as the realization that his brother was after Naruto. Itachi was the reason he was even out here in the first place. As soon as he had heard about his brother infiltrating Konoha, he almost couldn't believe it, and in search of Naruto of all people. He had not wasted any time trying to figure it out. Such things could be found out after he had defeated his brother and saved Naruto. That is how he imagined it would go anyway. Once he got here, however, his world was flipped on its head. Between watching his brother's Tsukuyomi fail, his large shark-like partner besting Naruto like it was a child's game, and then, that thing. Was that thing really Naruto? Just what the hell had he seen? What was going on? Itachi didn't even try to fight it. He retreated. His brother, an S-rank shinobi, murderer of the entirety of the strongest clan in Konoha, fled from that thing. If not for Jiraiya, Sasuke was sure that monster would have leveled the entire town, it even stopped there. But that only made it more uneasy to remember. Jiraiya of the freaking Sannin had fought it to a standstill. Not a sure win, not an actual victory, just a simple standstill. All that power, he seethed internally. That was the kind of strength he needed. The power that would help him avenge his clan, to finally kill his brother. Naruto. He broke from his thoughts as he heard someone approach. Sasuke had not managed to avoid being found during the chaos just to be caught now. Ducking behind some nearby rubble, he waited for them to pee by, only they didn't. Two sets of footsteps made their way to the center of the destruction, the last place Naruto, that creature, had been before Jiraiya. Actually, he still wasn't sure what Jiraiya had done to get rid of that thing. That was most unexpected. Sasuke's blood went cold. He knew that voice. The voice of the man he had vowed to kill. The voice that still haunted his every waking moment. Itachi. Right there. Within reach. His hand slowly dipped into his pouch and retrieved a kunai, but he couldn't hold it steady. Was he afraid? No. He was too excited. That had to be it. Just the jitters. He moved slowly, carefully, crawling around and through the rubble to get as close as he could, until he found the perfect vantage point, peering through a small gap in debris to watch and wait for the perfect moment. You're telling me, Kisame said. Want to explain what happened back there? The fourth Hokage was far more forward-thinking than anyone could have expected. Little Naruto's seal does far more than just contain the 9 tails it seems, he said, carefully inspecting the battle site around them. And your sword seemed to have some trouble with the boy. Should we question the viability of your stance in these matters? Faye, maybe the seal had something to do with that too, Kisame said, hoisting Samahata off his back and inspecting the 4 large claw marks in its side. They were healing, if a lot slower than they should have been, but for something to even hurt his sword to begin with was intriguing. Samahata has never had a problem with chakra before, tailed beast or otherwise. It was working just fine up to a point. Still, the 9 tails is a whole different breed of monster. I can't wait to get another shot at it. Be careful what you wish for, Itachi said. Perhaps it would be best to test your sword on the other Jinchuriki first. I don't need you dragging me down when the time comes. Kisame chuckled. So cold, Itachi. And here I thought we were becoming friends. Don't worry, we will be ready next time, he said, gently stroking the scaly sword, earning a series of pleased growls and shudders. Good. For now, we should leave. Leader will want to know what happened here. With Jiraiya personally protecting the Nine Tails, our plans may require more effort than first thought, Itachi said. Nothing we can't handle, Kisame said, quickly turning his attention to a nearby pile of rubble. And what about the other little brat? Sasuke froze as the shark man grinned, eyes focused on where he was hiding. It wasn't until he caught his mistake did his eyes dart back to where Itachi was standing. Hello, Sasuke. Too late. Despite knowing better, Sasuke turned around, coming eye to eye with his brother's Sharingan. His world collapsed into the all-too familiar realm of the Tsukuyomi. No, 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 I think a reminder is long overdue, little brother. The world shifted, morphing into the streets of Konoha, of their home. Blood strewn across the walls and ground, bodies littering the streets and the houses that lined them. A sword appeared in Itachi's hand, their parents materializing in front of him, on their knees, at his mercy. I will make sure the lesson sticks this time. Shizune huffed in frustration as she walked out of yet another gambling den and began her march toward the next one. She should have known better by now, but her kinder nature always got the better of her when it came to her sensei. Sometimes she did wonder if perhaps her complicit nature was doing her master more harm than good. Perhaps what she really needed was a firm helping hand, not a feeble student following her like a loyal pet. Shizune would do it herself, but whenever she tried to stand up to the woman she was met with laughter or general disregard. She had clearly left it too late to grow a backbone. But something had to give, and soon. Things were getting harder. More debt collectors chasing them, less loan sharks willing to give them money, and an ever-growing number of reputable establishments blacklisting their names for life. If Tsunade's goal was to systematically destroy her own reputation, she was doing an amazing job. She reached the next den quickly enough, and with the efficiency and accuracy of a medic she surgically weaved her way through the patrons and staff, checking every room to no avail. This search was taking too long. The day was coming to an end, and once the nightlife of the town kicked in, she wouldn't have a hope of finding her sensei. If she didn't know any better, Shizune would say that Tsunade didn't want to be found on purpose this time. Of course, she knew Tsunade never wanted to be found at all, but this time felt different, with her master going so far as to even take Taunton with her. She rarely took her beloved pig to any questionable places unless Shizune was there to keep an eye on things. That should have been red flag number 1. You and I are going to have a serious talk about this, Tsunade, she thought to herself, trying to maintain her brisk pace while now having to navigate around the growing hustle and bustle of the streets. So caught up in her worries and internal chastising was she that she hadn't noticed someone following her until it was too late. She felt a hand grab her shoulder from behind before she noticed the presence of the person, and unfortunately for them, she was not the mere helpless woman she appeared to be. In a movement so quick and fluid that the civilians around her weren't even sure what they saw, Shizune grabbed the offending hand and twisted it painfully, spinning around and pressing two now dull green glowing fingers to the person's throat. I am not in the mood to deal with, Lord Jiraiya. She spluttered. Jiraiya grinned sheepishly at the woman. Hey Shizune, been a while. You're looking well. Still just as sharp as ever I see, he said, his eyes looking down at his twisted wrist still in her surprisingly strong grip. Oh my god, she quickly pulled her hand away from his throat and released his hand before gently clasping his wrist between her now glowing hands. I am so sorry. Please forgive me. Don't worry about it. As far as beatings from women go, that was barely a warm-up. Should have me ready for when Tsunade sees me, he said with a chuckle, looking around curiously. Any idea where she is? Shizune shook her head. I haven't seen her all day, she said. I'm trying to track her down now, but she is being more trouble than she froze, finally noticing the large amount of dried blood covering the Sanin's clothes. Lord Jiraiya, are you alright? Jiraiya smiled. Oh it's nothing. Just a little cut. Before he could protest, Shizune placed her hand on his chest. It didn't take long at all for her expression to sour. What on earth happened to you? It's not that big of a deal, I promise, he said. Now please, will you help me find Tsunade? Shizune frowned. What's going on, Jiraiya? She asked. If you want me to help, I need to know what you need sensei for. What are you getting her into? Jiraiya sighed deeply. He was not having much luck with stubborn women lately. When had he lost his brilliant charm? I can explain as we go, but first, he lifted his shirt with a sheepish smile, showing 4 poorly healed claw marks running across his side. I could actually use a little touch-up. Temari breathed heavily, a sheen of sweat doing little to keep her cool as she once again went through the hand seals. Slowly and precisely, she molded her chakra, feeling it form and flow through her body, shifting with each new gesture. It was always an interesting sensation when learning a new jutsu, the way the chakra would behave differently inside of her in preparation for what was to come, feeling for what it should and shouldn't be until the right results were found. For the most part, ninjutsu was just a matter of trial and error with a splash of creativity. After that, it boiled down to discipline and routine. She had already learnt several useful jutsu, even mastered them to levels that most shunin would consider adept, but her library was still relatively small, especially when it came to the most important field of all, her chakra nature. Her chakra spiked as she reached the final hand seal. Reaching out, she flattened her hand and let her chakra flow around her arm in 2 separate bodies, both swirling and twisting around her hand, grinding endlessly against one another. The air around her arm shifted as she focused, carefully introducing her chakra nature into the now fully formed blade. With a grunt, Temari leapt into a sprint, her eyes locked onto a nearby tree surrounding the clearing as she closed the gap in remarkable time. She swiped her arm at the trunk and pushed outward with her chakra, watching in glee as the wood parted like butter under a red-hot knife, her hand pinged through effortlessly until it cleared the tree entirely. Her victory was short-lived, as almost as soon as the chakra dissipated from her arm, was she forced to jump out of the way of the falling tree. As the dust settled on the destruction she wrought to the once peaceful and quiet forest of Mount Myoboku, Temari sat with her back to her freshly defeated training post, panting and smiling at her accomplishment. She looked around the clearing at the other trees she had used to practice this technique, seeing only deep gashes or splintered holes where she had gotten the chakra control wrong or the wind nature hadn't fully taken hold. Each tree showed the stages of her progress, of which she couldn't wait to show Baki. He would surely be proud. Very impressive, girl, Shima said, hopping up onto the newly toppled tree trunk. To have such skill with chakra nature at such a young age is truly remarkable. Temari jumped up at the old toad's appearance, bowing as she continued to catch her breath. Lady Shima, thank you, she said before suddenly realizing that maybe dropping trees in the toad's homeland was a bad idea. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do this much damage. Shima laughed. Haha, oh you sweet thing, no amount of destruction you could unleash would be any worse than when Gamabunta first started training with Jiraiya, she said. Those two were a walking disaster before they mastered teamwork and control. But enough about that, have you eaten? Can't have you going hungry while you train. Temari scrunched her face up at the thought of food. The toads, while very generous and kind, had very little to offer in the way of food. Everything they offered was edible, sure, it was probably even good for you too. But if she was starving in the desert, Temari would think twice before downing another bowl of whatever stew Shima managed to brew. Yeah no, I ate before coming out here, she said quickly, patting her stomach. No need to worry. Shima quirked her brow at the girl as an audible grumble came from her stomach, as if her body was actively outing her for lying. Come along, Temari, she said. I will not have you starve on my watch, especially not when I sent for some food from one of your human restaurants. You did? Temari asked, hopeful but not unprepared for disappointment. Yes, well, Naruto made his distaste for our food known, loudly, Shima said. At least you had the decency to maintain your manners. I thought it would be best to accommodate your tastes. If you don't eat enough, then neither of you will heal properly. Oh, thank you, Lady Shima. You didn't need to. Not a worry, child, the toad said, hopping up onto Temari's shoulder. I hope you don't mind giving an old lady a lift. Sore joints, you see. Temari chuckled. Shima reminded her a lot of Lady Chio from Suna. Neither of them would ever find out about each other if she could help it. The two of them together would be impossible to deal with. I don't mind, she said, beginning the walk back to the hut. Once they arrived, Shima hopped off the girl's shoulder and gave her a smile. Why don't you go and check on Naruto? I'll go find Pa and see if Jiraiya has sent word, she said. The food and supplies are inside. Temari was quick to make her way inside at the prospect of a proper meal, only stop and stare curiously at the sight before her. What are you doing? She asked. Naruto barely lifted a single eyelid to look at her before closing it again and returning to his blissful ignorance of the world around him. He was sat cross-legged against the wall of the hut, his hands resting gently in his lap. A good portion of his body was still wrapped in bandages, although what skin was visible was a fresh pinky color. The Kyuubi's chakra was no longer flowing from the seal in an amount that offered him any substantial benefits, but that didn't mean his body had suddenly returned to normal. His wounds still healed with an unsettling speed, even if that provided problems of its own. Who would have known that regenerating almost all his skin back would be so itchy? At least it was better than sitting around in agony for weeks or months on end. Meditating, he said plainly. Temari scoffed. You, meditating? Well, aren't you full of surprises? Naruto frowned. What do you want? Nothing, she said, picking up a bag laying by the door and moving to sit next to Naruto, much to the boy's annoyance. I'm just checking in. Gotta make sure you aren't going to go crazy Kyuubi kid on us again. Speaking of, any luck? No, he said. I can't feel him anymore. The seal is too tight now. I can't even draw on any of his chakra. Consider yourself lucky, Temari said offhandedly. Shikaku never shuts up according to Gaara. Keeps him awake all the time, always trying to get out and wreak havoc. What we wouldn't give to have his seal tightened just for a little while. Naruto huffed. He didn't bother saying anything. He knew Gaara's condition was different to his own, no two people suffered the same, but Temari had very little idea what she was talking about. The fox was his prisoner. It was within his body, his mind. No one else should have had any control over what was a part of him. The Kyuubi was in at times, but he was a part of Naruto's life whether he liked it or not. To have that taken away from him without his say was insulting. He had a lot to talk to Jiraiya about when he finally returned. Oh great, ramen, Temari said dryly, pulling several packets of the noodles from the bag. Guess those are for you. Chestnuts are mine, do not even touch them. Orange clothes, yours. Oh, she paused as she pulled out a small handheld fan. It was an odd piece, much smaller than the large battle fan she was practiced with using, but this one had its own unique style. It was slightly larger than a normal handheld folding fan, and made of noticeably heavier material. Temari was still going to replace her main fan as soon as possible, but for the time being this would be a good and lightweight alternative. This will work. She tucked it away, managing to hide the entire thing in the folds of her sash at the small of her back. Naruto tried to ignore Temari as she continued to rummage through the bags that the toads had brought from Konoha. The fact that they hadn't simply returned the two of them back to the village and left Jiraiya to deal with his teammate alone was annoying. He wasn't about to complain though, not to the toads anyway. He knew if he was back in Konoha he would be stuck in the hospital, and he was very much enjoying not being there while he healed. Something about Mount Myoboku made him feel at ease. There was a calmness to the lands, and a power that dwelled in the very soil and trees around them. Naruto was sure if the Kyuubi wasn't locked away right now he would have an insight into what he was sensing, but with no sign of that being corrected anytime soon, he resigned to simply enjoying the peace. You were training with wind ninjutsu, he said out of the blue. Temari gave him a strange look before sniffing her shirt curiously. Do I stink? I'll go bathe soon, she said. You don't stink, Naruto said, his tone failing to be erring in any way. You just, people smell a certain way when they use different ninjutsu. Naruto wasn't even entirely sure why he was talking. He supposed he was bored. With the ever-present voice in his head now missing, it became apparent that he did enjoy holding conversations of a sorts, he just didn't have all that much experience doing with other people. At some point or another he and Temari were going to have to pee off as a couple, so it wouldn't hurt to get the ball rolling on it. That's cool, I think, Temari said, looking at the boy curiously. What do they smell like? The idea of being able to identify people's elemental alignment by smell was an interesting prospect, but what was even more interesting for Temari was Naruto awkwardly attempting small talk. Dare she say it, it was almost cute. There was no way Naruto knew he was making barely noticeable expressions of frustration as he carefully chose his words, and she wasn't going to tell him. Fire smells like burnt hair, he said. They usually don't realize they are singeing their hair unless it's really bad. But they almost always smell like it. Temari scrunched up her nose at the thought. She was glad to not have this ability. The last time she fought a fire jutsu user, she had her hair singed and the smell lingered for days. Water smells like rain. I feel like I could have guessed that, Temari muttered, mostly to herself. Lightning smells like bad eggs, he continued, earning another displeased look from the girl. The bigger the lightning jutsu, the worse the smell. So the chirping bird jutsu your teammate used on Gaara makes him smell horrible for hours after, Naruto said, his nose twitching at the memory. Earth smells musty and bland. Like they just took a shower in dirt. Temari nodded approvingly of that. Not many people with an affinity for earth nature had particularly colorful personalities. Most of the ones she knew from Suna were all sticklers for the rules and followed routines too much. She frowned as she realized Naruto had left Wind until last. Maybe it smelled weird and he was waiting to break the news. That would make things awkward. If they were really going to try and make this whole marriage idea work, then he was going to have to deal with whatever she smelled like. And Wind? She asked, waiting for him to say something ridiculous. Wind, he trailed off as he looked outside to the mountains, all green and covered in lush forest, the wind keeping everything in a constant flowing motion. Wind smells like the forest. The leaves, the trees, flowers. I think it depends on the person. But it is almost always something pleasant. Oh, Temari started, giving him a questioning look. And what do I smell like? And if you say flowers, I'm going to call you out on it, because I know damn well I don't smell like a rose over here. Freshly cut GR, he said, turning his attention to her and internally enjoying the perplexed look on her face. You smell like freshly cut GR. You must use more chakra than you mean to and cut the GR around you while you train because it's really strong today. Temari blinked a few times. And you, don't like it? She asked unsurely. She still wasn't any good at reading Naruto. She could only assume from how he had reacted to smelling her when he woke up from his injuries. No, he said. It's quite nice. Temari tried her best not to blush a little at that comment. At least Naruto didn't seem to care about her blushing at his words, for which she was grateful. Well, that makes things easier, I guess, she said before giving him an up and down glance. You might want to go for a bath soon though. You don't stink yet, but it won't be long, and your bandages need to be changed. Naruto internally grumbled. The benefit to the Biju cloak was that it burned off all forms of bacteria and smell from his body, and his healing meant that his wounds never festered or smelled bad. Still, a few days recovering in bandages was going to start to make anyone smell funky, and Temari was right. It was better to get it over with before that happened. If anyone was sensitive to their own odor, it was Naruto. How some people walked around in their own stench was beyond him. That being said, his wounds weren't all healed yet, which meant only one thing: it was going to hurt. Come on, Temari said cheerfully, standing up and gesturing for Naruto to follow. I'll show you where we can have a bath. She stopped to grab a roll of bandages from a nearby pack and then headed out the door. It was a slow process following Temari down the mountain. Naruto finally understood why the Kyuubi had always refrained from giving him more of its chakra than it thought he could handle at the time. The damage to his muscles was more than he expected, but thankfully the more he moved the better things seemed to feel. Thankfully, Temari was patient with him and maintained a pace that he could match. Eventually they reached a spot where a gentle stream pooled in several spots, the water clean and clearly warm if the slight steam on the surface was anything to go by. Hot springs? He asked in surprise. Temari grinned widely. You have no idea how happy I was when Shima brought me down here for the first time, she said. I was worried we were going to have to freeze our butts off in one of the rivers. Naruto internally let out a sigh of relief. He had feared much the same, knowing that a cold bath would be an extremely uncomfortable experience right now. I'll let you know when I'm. He paused awkwardly as he turned to Temari. Done. Temari, already in the middle of undressing, gave him a perplexed look. What? Okay. You let me know when you're done, he said quickly, turning to leave. Don't tell me you're shy, Temari said amusedly. Big bad Jinchuriki can't handle seeing some skin. Naruto gave her a bored stare. I'm not a pervert, he said simply. Would you not prefer your privacy? Temari shrugged. I don't mind, she said. Besides, who do you think was changing your bandages while you were out? We are way beyond the point of being shy around each other. Naruto had the decency to try and look somewhat embered that he hadn't considered the logistics of his care. Back in Konoha, he would always wake up in the hospital, being treated by people he didn't care to know or remember, he needed care at all. Making a mental note to never let himself become so vulnerable around people he had to deal with often, he began painstakingly and carefully removing his clothes and the myriad of bandaging that enveloped him. By the time he lowered himself into the hot spring, Temari had already been soothing herself in the water for some minutes. For a while the two sat in silence. Neither wanted to interrupt the peacefulness of the moment, nor did they want to risk making things awkward. Naruto wouldn't say it aloud, but he was actually enjoying the atmosphere of this place. He always enjoyed being away from Konoha. It never mattered where he went, only that was away from people who knew him, who knew what he was, who looked at him with such disdain. Temari didn't look at him like that. It made being around her far more tolerable. Naruto surmised it was from growing up with Gaara. She was used to the concept of a Jinchuriki. But he remembered back during the invasion, he had seen the fear in her when the Aikibi was loose, when Gaara gave into the bloodlust. So why then, did she never look at him like that? Especially now, after what she had seen he was capable of. Am I not as scary as Gaara? He thought to himself, quickly shaking his head at the idea. That was the most ridiculous thought to cross his mind in years. He didn't care if anyone feared him. It just helped most of the time when they did. Reputation mattered little in the grand scheme of things. But the question remained, what was Temari's game? She had to be playing at something. No one was this calm around him unless they knew they were stronger, which she wasn't, or they were scheming something. Not to say that was surprising. Suna might have been groveling at Konoha's feet with this marriage, but that didn't mean they couldn't still plan and scheme for their own benefit. It would be less believable if they didn't try. So, I take it you don't lose control of your tailed beast very often? Temari asked curiously. Naruto gave her a side-eyed stare. It isn't common, no. That was a lie. He and the Kyuubi had a deal, an understanding dating back years now. This had never happened before. Even if it had been a life or death scenario, Naruto had always been clear that he didn't want collateral damage. The last thing either of them wanted was too much attention, or worse, setbacks. His hand gently rubbed the seal on his stomach as he frowned. So much for that idea. What does it feel like? Temari asked. The question had been nagging at her for a while now. With Gaara it seemed much more straightforward. Maybe that was due to the sheer difference in power between the Aikibi and the Kyuubi. What was as simple as falling asleep for Gaara was clearly a far more destructive experience for Naruto, and he hadn't even unleashed the full extent of the fox's power. 4 tails. Not even half, and this is what it did to him. What would all 9 do? Naruto regarded the girl carefully. Did she even realize how suspicious it was for her to be asking questions about the Kyuubi? He sighed. It was obvious even to him that she wasn't digging for info. She was genuinely curious, if only in the hopes of understanding her brother more. That much he could respect. It feels like my blood is on fire, he said. It burns. My blood, my chakra, everything is just fire. But it feels good, I think. Good. He nodded. When you're on fire, you don't feel anything else, he said. Nothing else hurts. Nothing else matters, it's just you and the fire. You and the power to do anything you want, if you can focus enough to do anything more than kill anything that moves. Naruto watched her reaction. She was clearly reliving memories of her past, reevaluating her outlook on Gaara. She was trying hard to understand, more than anyone else would bother. He supposed, in a way, Gaara was lucky to have someone so committed to overcome that boundary. You should ask him. What? Temari looked up at him, surprised. Gaara, he clarified. It would be different for him. The Aikibi is different. You should talk to him, ask him what it feels like. He might even appreciate it. Do you even realize who you are talking about? She said. Gaara doesn't talk to people. He tolerates me and Konkuro and kills anyone else he can. If I could get answers from him, I would. You want to understand him, to help him. You want your brother, not the Aikibi, Naruto said casually, earning a wide-eyed look from the girl. You are disturbingly easy to read, he added, condescendingly. Temari frowned. Is that really such a bad thing? She asked. To want to help my little brother. No, Naruto said. Temari waited patiently for him to continue, but it became apparent that was all he had to say. She didn't bother pushing the subject further. There would be plenty of time to grill him for more info before she had to confront her brother again. If she was lucky, that would be a long time away. Dealing with one Jinchuriki at a time was stressful enough. Do you think Jiraiya is making any progress? She asked. Only if he keeps his mind out of the gutter and his hands to himself, Naruto said. How that old pervert hasn't been killed already is beyond me. Temari chuckled. Is he really that bad? The first time I met Jiraiya, he was perving on the woman's bathhouse in Konoha, Naruto said. And what were you doing to find him there? Temari asked suspiciously. Naruto gave her an odd look. Had he not just told her he wasn't a pervert? I was minding my business, he said. Until I caught him, and pushed him through the wall. The women inside took care of the rest. Temari nodded approvingly at that answer. Well, at least I don't have to worry about you leering at me, she said with a wink. Sadly, she didn't get a reaction from him. Well, seducing him isn't going to work, she thought. In a way that was a good thing, but it did make things more challenging. Most guys would have tried to steal a peek by now, especially in a hot spring. She would just have to find some other way for them to bond. At least it wouldn't cost her dignity. Naruto sniffed the air curiously, gazing off towards the trees nearby. Jiraiya, he said warningly. Jiraiya smiled guiltily as he walked out from behind a tree. Don't worry, I wasn't taking notes this time, he said. I just didn't want to interrupt you two while you seemed to be getting along so well. Temari scoffed at the man. You could have waited back at the hut, she said, glaring at him. If I'd had known you would be here, I would have, Jiraiya said. How was I supposed to know young love worked so fast? He laughed as Temari blushed and sunk deeper into the water. Pervert. Oh please. My tastes are far more refined than that, he said. Speaking of my tastes actually, I found Tsunade. Are we going back to Konoha? Naruto asked. He was enjoying being away from the village, but if he had to choose between the village and Jiraiya, he chose the village. Not exactly. Meaning, Jiraiya sighed deeply. Tsunade hasn't agreed to come back to Konoha. But she has offered to heal the both of you, he said. It isn't much, but it's something. All P, Naruto said. You don't have a choice, Jiraiya said. We have no idea what the side effects of using that much of the Kyuubi's chakra are. Until I am sure you aren't a risk, we aren't going back, and that seal stays locked up tight. Actually, Temari spoke up. A medic does sound good. Excellent. I'll be back at the hut when you two are done, Jiraiya said, giving the two a knowing and perverted smirk. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Temari sighed in relief as Jiraiya left them alone. Come on then, she grumbled, annoyed that her relaxation had been cut short. I'll help bandage you back up. As the two got out of the water and began drying themselves, Temari could feel Naruto's eyes on her. She didn't mind if he looked. She was already well and truly prepared for the more humiliating demands of this marriage, so a little leering was honestly the least of her concerns. But when she turned to catch him out on it, she found not the leering eyes of a pervert, but a look of shame. What? Naruto's eyes were fixated on her body. Temari was attractive, even he couldn't deny that. Her confidence and lack of shame was a breath of fresh air compared to the always private and hostile nature of the girls in Konoha. But that wasn't why he was staring. Her arms were covered in scratches and bruises, even her face had several small nicks that he hadn't noticed until now. It was her side, however, that drew his attention the most. A large patch of skin, blackened and purple, covering her ribs on her left side. Temari had never mentioned being injured, not once. She didn't so much as wince or whine the whole time while she helped him recover. It wasn't hard to figure out why she might have kept her lips tight about such a thing, considering he most likely caused it. Temari followed his eyes to her bruised side and frowned. Don't, she said. It's fine. It wasn't your fault. I don't blame you. You should have said something. It doesn't matter. Okay, she said, putting her shirt back on quickie. Temari grabbed the roll of bandages and walked over to Naruto. Once we see Tsunade, it'll be like it never happened. Now hold your arms out. Naruto pulled his pants on and did as she asked, standing still while she applied the bandages. It felt rude to have her help him, but he appreciated that she wasn't holding her injuries against him. Had he hurt anyone from Konoha, he wouldn't have heard the end of it for months. Naruto had to admit, Temari was proving herself to be far from the worst choice for the marriage. What's with the twerp? Tsunade asked. Who's the hag? Naruto countered. Jiraiya sighed. Behave you two, he said. Tsunade, this is Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto, this is Tsunade. I'm Temari of the Sand, Temari said, introducing herself with a courteous bow. It is nice to meet you, Lady Tsunade. Tsunade smirked. Finally, someone with manners, she said, glaring at Jiraiya. You could learn a thing or two. Naruto looked at Tsunade warily, then at Jiraiya, then back to Tsunade, a look of genuine curiosity on his face. You don't look old, he said, pausing to sniff the air. But you smell old. What was that? Tsunade asked daringly. Genjutsu, Naruto concluded. That was a shame. He had almost no ability with genjutsu. Even if he wanted to see what she actually looked like, he wouldn't be able to dispel it. He would have to learn how to do that later. Nothing. Tsunade huffed. That's what I thought, she muttered. You must be the Kyuubi brat. Heard you caused quite a bit of trouble a few towns over. Care to explain yourself? Naruto clenched his jaw. Not to you. Tsunade, Jiraiya said, his tone warning her to play nice. Fine, fine. Come on, brats. Let's get you healed up nice and quick so you can all piss off and leave me alone, Tsunade said, her hand starting to glow a faint green. Her first, Naruto said, gesturing to Temari. Tsunade shrugged. I don't care who goes first, just make it quick. Temari blinked in surprise before scowling at Jiraiya. Not around a pervert. Smart girl. Jiraiya, leave, Tsunade said coldly. Come on, Naruto. I have something I want to show you anyway, Jiraiya said, leading the boy away. Once they were gone, Temari finally took the time to inspect the women before her. Naruto was right, Tsunade was much younger in appearance than she should have been, but Temari wasn't stupid enough to comment on it. The Sanin's apprentice, who had remained silent this whole time, watched on with a solemn expression and pig. What was that about? She shook her head. It didn't matter. All that mattered was getting healed and moving on. As great as it would have been to finally see a strong and powerful kunoichi ascend to the role of Kage for one of the great 5 villages, it wasn't worth forcing someone into the position. That they were meeting them here, at a gambling den, was questionable enough. Tsunade's reputation wasn't necessarily all that amazing, but this proved just how far the legend had sunk. The bitter expression on the woman's face was enough to guess what kind of luck she must have been having here already. Being tracked down by her old teammate was also less than favorable. Alright, what am I looking at? Tsunade asked, the smell of alcohol on her breath. Temari glanced around, making sure no one else was around to see. She didn't care if Naruto saw her, for obvious reasons, but that didn't mean she was going to give just anyone a free show. She lifted her shirt and bandages. I think I broke some ribs, she said, managing to hold back a wince as Tsunade didn't hesitate to place her hand on the bruise. Well, they aren't snapped, so that's a start, Tsunade said. You hold yourself well. I almost wouldn't have thought you were this injured. Thanks, Temari said, Tsunade's chakra already working its magic and bringing her much needed relief. So, how did you get stuck traveling with those two? Tsunade asked. Does Suna have an offer for me as well? Oh, no, not at all. Well, I guess I'm not a Suna kunoichi anymore, Temari said, gently touching her village symbol around her neck. Suna had permitted her to keep it, and she hadn't been prepared to part with it yet. Naruto and I are engaged. Tsunade quirked an eyebrow curiously at that. Aren't you two a little young? Political marriage. Suna's attempt at reconciling for its transgressions against Konoha, Temari explained. Not ideal, but could be worse, all things considered. As long as I can stay alive, it should be fairly straightforward. So that old fool Sarutobi agreed to this. What a joke. And you want me to come be the Hokage so I can undo this and let you go home? Tsunade asked. No, Temari said. I know what I agreed to. I wouldn't shame my village by taking the easy way out. Screw the villages, Tsunade said. Think about yourself. No one else will. They will just take what they can from you and throw you away as soon as it benefits them. Well, I guess yours already did that to you. Otherwise, you'd still be back there, wouldn't you? Serving as a shinobi gets you nothing but loss and heartache. Once you figure that out, you'll be better off. Why do you think I'm here? Temari said. At least I got to choose to be married off. It might not be glamorous, and it might suck at times, but it was my choice. The first choice I ever got to make with my life. And it's still better than being a sad miserable drunk with a gambling addiction, ow. Tsunade smirked as she squeezed Temari's ribs. Careful brat, I'm not the one who needs healing. Temari scoffed. You sure about that? Tsunade laughed. I like you, she said. You're a smart, but I like you. Lucky me, Temari muttered. Look, I'm not here to question your life choices, Tsunade said. You can make all the mistakes you want. You are your own idiot. But I mean, look at you, is it really worth getting hurt like this? Is it worth dying for? Maybe not, but it's worth a try. Tsunade rolled her eyes. She had had her fill of optimistic fools for one lifetime. That should sort you out for the moment, she said, withdrawing her hand from the girl's side. I would refrain from getting hit there again for a while, just in case. Temari took a deep breath, happy that it wasn't accompanied by pain anymore. Thanks, she said simply, turning to leave only to stop as Tsunade grabbed her arm. Be careful, the woman said. Marrying Naruto isn't as simple as you might think. Don't let your guard down. Temari nodded as Tsunade let her go and she left. As nice as it was for the woman to be concerned about her, Temari didn't take much heed to the warning. Tsunade didn't know the experience she had with Jinchuriki. Staying alive was an art form she was quickly perfecting. She walked outside to find Naruto sitting on the ground, a water balloon held in his hand. The rubber surface bulged and strained as the water inside swirled, but with each ping moment Naruto's face only became more and more focused and frustrated. Temari watched on in silence, trying to understand what he was trying to do without breaking his focus. Briefly she wondered where Jiraiya was. Eventually, the water balloon began pulsing and deforming rapidly, until it exploded suddenly, soaking Naruto who, surprisingly, was now sporting a miv grin on his face. What was that? Temari asked. Naruto finally realized he was being watched and frowned. He had been far too focused on the balloon. It's called a Rasengan, he said. Jiraiya is teaching it to me. Bursting the water balloon is the first step. He said it would take me months. Guess he is as stupid as he looks. He stood up and looked over Temari curiously. Are you healed? Temari nodded with a smile. Much better, she said. Your turn now. Be warned, she's a bit grouchy. Of course, Naruto grumbled. Jiraiya has run off to conduct his precious research, Naruto said. I wouldn't bother going to find him. Figures. I'll wait for you then, Temari said. Want to get some food once you're done? Maybe, Naruto said, sniffing the air. I hope you like ramen. As long as you're paying. Naruto rolled his eyes and started towards Tsunade's room. So long as Temari kept to her current level, he might even find her entertaining. Entering the room, he was met with the same judgmental stare he had gotten upon meeting Tsunade. At least the pig looked happy to see him. He didn't wait for any instruction, immediately taking off his jacket and shirt before starting the arduous process of carefully unwrapping his bandages and rolling them up. Naruto made sure to ignore the barely muffled gasp of Tsunade's apprentice as his injuries were finally uncovered. His accelerated healing aside, it still probably looked worse than it actually was, with some parts of his skin still not even growing back yet. Naruto wasn't sure what he expected of the woman, but if she kept looking at him the way she was, he was going to lose his mind. Who the hell was she to look down on him all high and mighty like? So, this is what happens when a Jinchuriki loses control, huh? Tsunade said curiously, inspecting his injuries with a keen eye. I bet you feel pretty dumb. I feel alive, Naruto said, glaring at the woman. I was attacked. There wasn't a lot I could do. And you could have killed a lot of people with your little rampage, Tsunade said. Why should I heal you if you are just going to run off and do something like that again? What urances do I have that helping you won't just harm more people later? Jiraiya tightened the seal, he said bitterly. Not having access to the Kyuubi was still very much a sore point. The peace and quiet were nice on occasion, but his mind had never felt so lonely. If you don't want to heal me, fine. I only agreed to come here for Temari. Tsunade scoffed. Don't try to play me, brat, she said. You only care about covering up the injuries you caused her. If Suna found out you were already putting your betrothed in harm's way, what would they think? Can't go messing up your dear Hokage's plans, now can you? I couldn't give a damn about that geezer's plans, Naruto said sharply. I don't care what he wants. I don't care what he thinks is best for me. I just want to be left alone. If it wasn't for that perverted old toad, I wouldn't even be out here in the first place. But here I am, getting attacked for no reason, and stuck watching that idiot try to convince you to come back with us. And for what? What makes you so special? Careful, brat, she warned. I could be your next Hokage. Talking to me like that isn't going to do you any favors. I don't need any favors from you, he said. Besides, you won't take the offer. Even if you wanted to. You can't be Hokage. Oh, and what makes you so sure? Naruto looked at the empty bottle sitting off the side, before turning an unimpressed look back to Tsunade. You're still running away, he said. Shut up, Tsunade said. You don't know what you're talking about. I know what running away from yourself looks like, he said. Let me guess, someone close to you died and you blame yourself. How typical. I said shut up. Tsunade cleared the distance between, fist raised, and a concerning amount of chakra pumping through her fingers. She wouldn't kill the boy, she wasn't drunk enough to make that kind of mistake, but he would learn the hard way to respect his elders. Well, he would have, had Shizune not gotten involved. Tsunade didn't remember her student ever being so fast, or so strong, but in the blink of an eye she was between Tsunade and Naruto, taking the force of the punch with her forearm. Shizune. A loud slap echoed through the room as Shizune's hand left its mark on her sensei's cheek. That is enough, Tsunade. She said, tears in her eyes. She had seen her sensei fall low before, but this was too much for her to witness. He is just a boy. A boy who needs help. Is that not enough for you? Shizune. Save it, Shizune said. You can sober up before you apologize. She turned to Naruto and offered him a small smile. Naruto, if you'd like, I can treat you. Naruto huffed at the scene before him, casting a disappointing stare at Tsunade. Legendary Sannin indeed. It seemed Orochimaru was the only one of the three to retain any of his notoriety in their age. Jiraiya was an idiot pervert, and Tsunade was just a sour drunk. If this was what Konoha was putting its trust into, then perhaps the village was better off without a new Hokage. I don't care, he said, turning to leave, Shizune in tow. Tsunade fell back into her seat, grabbing a nearby bottle and taking a large swig. This was not what she needed right now. Why Sarutobi felt the need to send Jiraiya after her at all was beyond her. It wasn't a secret that she was in no state to take the office. She couldn't see herself getting any better at Konoha either. That place was just a constant reminder of her shortcomings and failures. Of everyone's failures. A shinobi village was not somewhere for people to be happy. So, it's that bad, huh? Jiraiya asked solemnly from the doorway. Just get out. I don't need any speeches from you right now, Tsunade said. You need to wake up, Tsunade, he said. You've been wallowing like this for long enough. Don't you think it's time to let go? No. Jiraiya sighed. Okay then, he said. We will be gone as soon as I'm happy that both the kids are healed. You have until then to change your mind. Tsunade watched her former teammate leave. Let go. Who did he think he was to talk to her about such things? God. She hated him sometimes. Orochimaru at least had the courtesy to go mad with power to excuse his lack of humanity and feelings. But Jiraiya, he was just infuriatingly quick to come to terms with the world and move on. No matter how many times she watched him do it, it always got under her skin. Let go. The world was lucky she only held onto her grief. She could have flattened that damned village years ago if she wanted to. Absent-mindedly, she played with the crystal hanging from her neck. Her grandfather had been a fool. So had she. Maybe Orochimaru wasn't so stupid to go rogue. As she sat there in silence, she thought on the offer the snake had made her only days before. She'd be lying if she didn't admit it sounded tempting. At least now she had someone here who could make sure Shizune got back to Konoha safe. She wasn't so naive to think her apprentice would leave Konoha like that with her. Not that she would want her to come with her anyway. There was no telling just how dangerous things could get with Orochimaru. I'm sorry about her, Shizune said, her hands glowing green and gently hovering over Naruto's arms. She isn't normally this bad. Naruto held back a sigh of relief as the itchiness of his slowly healing wounds melted away. It's fine, he said. In truth, he didn't care about Tsunade. She could hate the world all she wanted for all he cared. The only downside to her refusal to come back to Konoha was that now someone else was going to have to take up the mantle of Hokage. Jiraiya had already refused, thank God. But that didn't leave very many options, suitable ones anyway. One of the elders was more than likely the best fit, but they were not what Naruto would call the best candidates. He supposed that he would get to watch the chaos of it all unfold once they got back. Hopefully that wouldn't be too much longer now. So, you and Temari. That's good, Shizune said awkwardly. Usually when she healed people there was always a healthy amount of small talk, but Naruto was unnerving her with his silence. Temari is nice, Naruto said unsurely. It wasn't a lie. She was a very nice girl, all things considered. She had already extended far more kindness and caring towards him than most would bother, so as far as he was concerned, she was one of the good ones. But the marriage is pointless. Konoha and Suna could easily rebuild their alliance without it. The old man only agreed to it so as to have some way of tying me to the village. Shizune nodded in understanding. And does the Hokage have reason to be concerned if you have nothing tying you down? She asked carefully, smiling as the boy narrowed his eyes her. Don't worry. Technically I am not an active shinobi of Konoha. I'm as much of a runaway as Tsunade is. I would understand if you wanted to get away from it all. If only, Naruto grumbled. Being a Jinchuriki has more downfalls than most people realize, she said softly. You don't think you have a choice, do you? Naruto glared at her. I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, Naruto. Even you. And you? He asked. Why would someone like you choose to follow Tsunade around all this time? It won't get you anywhere. Shizune smiled sadly. He was right. Following Tsunade around might very look like a fool's choice from the outside. Her shinobi and medic career had all but ended once she chose to follow her sensei, but she didn't mind. Titles and accomplishments meant little to her these days. She is all I have left, she said. I don't mind giving up a few things if it means holding on to someone precious to me. Naruto huffed. Must be nice. What? Having someone, Naruto said. Sometimes it's less about having someone, and more about them having you, Shizune said, earning a strange look from Naruto. Some people are hurt, are sad, and can't be there for anyone. Those are the people that need someone the most. And it's up to the strongest of us to step up and be there while we can. She gently took both of his hands in hers, her chakra still working its way through his wounds as the burns on his fingers began to fade. There was still much to do. That's all I can do for today. I know you must be eager to continue training, so I've made sure your hands won't get hurt any further. But please, take it easy for a while. Give your body time to catch up. She could have finished all of his healing in one sitting, but Shizune needed time. With any luck, this might just be the opportunity to help convince her sensei to go back to Konoha. Thank you, Naruto said, a thoughtful look on his face as he put his shirt back on. He could already feel the improvement in his hands. Hopefully his progress with the Rasengan would improve now that he wasn't fighting against his injuries. He needed to wipe that smug look off Jiraiya's face. I expect to see you tomorrow before you start training, she said. I'm not going to be pleased if you add more injuries to the list just because I'm offering to heal you. And please let Temari know that she can come to me if there is anything more she needs. I think it's best if we leave Tsunade alone for a bit. Shizune waited patiently, her smile never fading, as Naruto collected his things and left with only a polite nod. He was troubled, that much she could deduce. But he was still good at heart. She wondered just how things in Konoha must have been for him to end up this way. It was all the more reason she and Tsunade needed to go back. The village must have been struggling in more ways than it led on to the outside world. If there were ever a time for a healer, it was now. All Shizune needed to do was somehow convince the woman to go along with it. Easier said than done. Her smile fell as she rubbed her forearm, her hand once again glowing green as she quickly healed the injury from Tsunade's punch. It wasn't anything worth fussing over, but it was still enough to make the young woman frown deeply. Such a punch could have seriously hurt Naruto had she not stepped in. Jinchuriki or not, Tsunade should have known better than to attack a child. Konoha could easily twist such a thing into an act of denouncement. Tsunade was already running from dead as it were. Shizune couldn't imagine how bad it would get if she was also running from the world as a rogue shinobi. She fully expected to find her sensei ped out by the time she got back to their room, Tsunade even bothered to leave the den. Shizune would likely have to venture back there to retrieve the woman later. Instead, much to her surprise, she opened the door to find the woman in question sitting at the table, an untouched bottle sitting in front of her, and a miserable expression on her face. It was rare that Tsunade's appearance ever gave any signs to her true age, but when she was upset the years had a way of seeping through. Those weren't the eyes of a young naive woman after all. Shizune, Tsunade said softly, looking cautiously at the woman's arm. Are you okay? Shizune nodded. I'll be fine, she said. You taught me well. Tsunade glared back at the bottle. I'm sorry. I know. He looks like him, don't you think? Tsunade asked. The fourth. Nawaki, Tsunade said. Little brat. Haunting me even now. Typical of him. He never could give up, could he? She played idly with the crystal on her necklace. If only he could see me now. How low I've gotten. He would probably know exactly what to say to get me off my butt. Shizune sighed. Nawaki is gone, Tsunade, she said. But, I can see the resemblance. Orochimaru cannot bring them back, Shizune interrupted. Not in any way that matters. Not in any form they would accept. You know they wouldn't want that. Let them rest, Tsunade. Let yourself rest. Let them go, Tsunade finished sadly. Jiraiya said the same thing. I guess he isn't as much of a fool as I thought. I don't know if I can. We can't keep running around like this. Tsunade nodded in understanding. It was only a matter of time before her lifestyle caught up to them. You want to go back to Konoha, don't you? She asked. Don't you? Shizune asked. After all this time, after hearing what the village is turning into, Konoha needs us, it needs you. Don't you want to go back and at least try to do something good? For their sake. You sound just like Dan sometimes, you know that. Tsunade said. He always had such a perfect moral comp too. Why did you have to share in his most infuriating trait? Shizune smiled. Someone has to keep you steered in the right direction. Tsunade rolled her eyes. I guess we should probably tell that old pervert about Orochimaru, she said with a groan. That idiot was going to give her such an, I told you so, look, and for once she couldn't pummel him into the ground for it. And then there was Naruto. That brat was going to get under her skin, she could feel it already.